My fiancé asked for an open relationship just weeks before our wedding. Am I the asshole for canceling the wedding? We were less than 2 weeks away from getting married when she asked me to accompany her to therapy. She was already seeing a therapist on her own and asked me to join her for a conversation before the wedding so we could be entirely honest with each other. That sounded unusual to me. I assumed we were already entirely honest with one another. After all, we were getting married in 2 weeks, right? She was also quite protective of her therapy sessions and did not discuss them openly. I'd never met her therapist, so being welcomed there felt out of place. The day came, and I attended the session. To protect myself, I kept my phone open and recorded audio. My fiancé had already arrived and I had to wait 20 minutes before being let inside. The therapist greeted me, shook my hand and we exchanged light talk. She informed me I wasn't as my fiancé had portrayed me. I assumed she was attempting to congratulate me. The therapist then turned to my fiancé and told her, "This may be more difficult than we anticipated." That freaked me out. But I remained calm, smiled politely, and did not respond. The therapist gave a brief speech that I do not like to repeat. As the therapist began emphasizing that we live in a modern world, my fiancée grasped my hand and expressed her desire for us to have a non-traditional marriage in the future. I grinned, not quite knowing what that meant. I assumed she was referring to seeking an equal partnership in which she would not be expected to give up her job or independence, a current girl power message. But it was something else entirely. She was talking about wanting to be able to sleep with other men once we married. I was stunned. It's 2018, I reminded myself, but seriously. She went on to say that she deeply loved me and would not be happy with me having the same freedom since the thought of me being with other women would break her heart. She couldn't take the idea of someone else stealing me from her. I allowed them to finish chatting. They both appeared to gain confidence, most likely as a result of my silence. It felt like they had practiced this. After they were finished, I asked the therapist if she was licensed. Her reply indicated that she had not expected that to be my first question. She agreed, so I instructed her to explain to my fiancé why we would not be marrying and would no longer be a couple, effective immediately. I wished them both luck and exited the office. I'm considering reporting to the therapist. I'm not sure whether I should report her to the clinic or a licensing board, but I believe there was some professional misconduct and I want her to be held accountable. That session did not go well for me at all. To be clear, that conversation would never end well. Even if my fiancé had wanted an open marriage in which I could sleep with other women, I would still have called off the wedding. That is not a marriage. It is a fake. It's also occurred to me that she might have already cheated on me. Looking back, certain things do not add up, and now that I have clarity, I feel foolish. I listened to the recording again, and I still can't believe what they said. Anyway, I called the wedding off. I'm normally a laid-back guy. I avoid arguments and conflicts because I follow principles and utilize common sense. Perhaps that gave my ex the impression that I was a pushover, but she was completely mistaken. After listening to the recording a few times, I'm convinced the therapist understood I wasn't how my fiancé described me in their sessions, hence the comment, "This may be harder than we thought." Now that the wedding has been cancelled, people are starting to ask questions, and I'm not sure how to handle it. I'm sure my ex is conducting damage control, but I have the video, and if she goes too far with her version of events, I won't be afraid to tell others what she was truly proposing. My parents and family also want answers, but I'm not sure what my ex has told them. I don't want them to think I was a fool for allowing things to progress to the point where she felt comfortable enough to tell me she wanted to sleep with other guys. She has also been blowing up my phone, my best friend's phone, and my brother's phone, saying, "We can work on this." She believes she did not understand what was stated during the therapy session and is willing to do whatever to make things right. This was the therapist's suggestion. She was opposed to it, etc. The final shriek of a dying siren. Her cries fell on deaf ears, and I owned those ears. We were also working on obtaining a loan to purchase a home, but I canceled everything. I effectively severed any ties we had, monetarily or otherwise. Her present appeal is that during treatment, she revealed her worries regarding our sexual history. I had much more partners than she did, and the therapist purportedly suggested that we level the field. Regardless of the truth, I'll report that therapist as soon as I figure out where and how. This post is largely a rant, but I'd like to know how you would handle questions from friends and family. My ex is definitely conducting her own damage control, and I don't want this to become a he said she said issue. I have the recording and was wondering if I should share it with the relevant parties. My ex does not know I have the recording. Small update. I'm at work and just received confirmation that the journal has been returned to my ex. I sent it early this morning via courier from our office, and she had to sign a confirmation that she received it. As several have suggested, I concluded that reading it would be ineffective because she never accepted responsibility for the incident. Update 1. Aside from the jokes, the 2 weeks after my initial post have been intriguing. Last Monday, I spoke with a lawyer at work about my problem with the therapist. At first, he assumed I was joking and inquired about the prank. I offered to play the recording for him and he accepted. The next day, we reviewed the recording together, and he pointed out stuff I hadn't observed. The therapist consistently used language such as "we think," "we want," and "we decided." She never once said, "Your ex asked me to talk with you," or "Your ex wants you to know." It was always either "we this" or "we that." The lawyer inquired as to my ultimate goal, whether I intended to file a lawsuit. I informed him I wasn't going to sue, but I wanted to report the therapist to the relevant authorities. We decided to write 2 letters, one to the clinic where the therapist works and another to the American Psychological Association, APA, which validated her accreditation. By Wednesday, a few more people at work had become aware of the problem, including one of the case researchers. She looked up information about the therapist, including internet ratings and contact information for 2 of her prior clients. The therapist did not have the best reviews. Several people were furious with her, and we were able to reach 2 of them via social media. When we described the scenario, they were eager to assist. Their stories were not any better than mine. The letters expanded in length as we included signed reports from the other 2 people, as well as my personal explanation of how my ex changed after starting therapy and a thorough account of my session with the doctor. Last Friday, I met with my ex's parents. They arrived at my parents' place and we had a conversation. My ex was also present and further material was revealed, which was then included in the report on the therapist. This week, reports were sent out and the clinic responded. They called our office Thursday morning, most likely to see if the allegation was legitimate. We spoke with one of their lawyers over the phone, and after we determined it was serious, someone on the other end was heard saying, "Well, crap." They stated that they were treating the situation extremely seriously. One of my coworkers noted that the clinic had received prior complaints, but never one this well documented, which could explain their prompt response. Their letter also stated that they were notifying the APA, which could have additional pressure. I'm not sure what will happen, but I consider my problem to be resolved. However, after speaking with the other 2 former patients, I strongly hope that the therapist will be probed. She sounds insane and certainly has a plan. She also wrecked their relationships, of whom one was a woman. Finally, my ex and her parents. My folks contacted last Friday and invited me to visit after work. When I arrived, I was surprised to see both my ex and her parents there. My initial thought was to go. This meeting was meant to be on my terms, but it appeared that she was attempting to control the situation. Let me tell you, it was not going to happen. My ex waited for me outside. She looked great. If there was ever a girl you wanted your parents to meet, she was it. She informed me that they were coming to speak with me and see if we could resolve this. They did not refer to her parents. Either she never informed them what happened, or she told them a version of the story that they did not believe. She had a journal with her and stated that she began writing in it before treatment and continued until Friday morning. She said I should read it since it will clear up all the uncertainty. I informed her it wasn't a book club. I wanted to go inside and start the chat, but she requested for 10 minutes to talk before meeting with her parents. She continued handing me her journal and began crying. Then my sister arrived, followed by my ex's sister. They had been there all along and came out to check on us. So I took the diary, walked inside, said hello to everyone and then left my ex in the back of the garden, in the most remote part of my parents' yard. They have a spacious garden with plenty of trees and benches. She left her job owing to the stress, which resulted in a breakdown that never improved. She was no longer visiting her therapist. Initially, she began treatment for work-related issues, but it gradually turned to focus on our relationship, which appeared to be the only thing the therapist was interested in. She never explained to her folks why she became my ex. Now she was seeing a different therapist. I just listened. She shifted the subject to us, informing me that I would be in charge. I'd handle the funds, have access to all of her devices, and be able to track her activities. Any property we owned would be in my name, and she would do everything I asked to win my trust. She basically reaffirmed what she had been expressing in her messages throughout the previous weeks. She listed far more items than I can recall. I'm not sure how she believed this was a healthy way for either of us to live. I asked if she had cheated. She told me that she had the opportunity to cheat but never did. I believed her, but it made me angry. What exactly did she mean by opportunity? If you are in a committed relationship, you do not place yourself in a position where infidelity is even a possibility. You do not want the opportunity. It's similar to stating, I had the opportunity to kill someone today. Why? What were you doing that resulted in such an opportunity? And why term it an opportunity, as if it were something good? That pretty much concluded our 10 minutes. I told her we should go talk to our parents, and we did. I requested our sisters to leave us alone since what we were about to discuss was not their concern. My sister huffed and puffed, but a stone home can withstand hurricanes, and she wasn't one. I detailed what happened. How the therapy session went and what I decided. I didn't say I had a recording since I didn't have to. My ex corroborated everything I had said, which astonished me. Her father had teary eyes, which shattered my heart. Her mother inquired if this was how she felt they had raised her and requested an explanation. My ex basically told them the same story. Work-related stress, depression, a breakdown, therapy focusing solely on our relationship. The therapist convincing her that our relationship was the source of all her stress, that she needed an open relationship to avoid losing me, and that she needed to level her sexual experience with mine. She said my reply jolted her out of her slump. She has quit her job and is seeking something less demanding. She'll do anything to get me back. My ex referenced the diary again, saying that if I read it, it would explain everything, and that while she disagreed with the therapist's opinions, she went along with them since the therapist was an authoritative figure with experience. Our parents glanced at me and I said, someone's private journal is not the type of literature I read, unless they're a dead poet. A big mistake. My purpose was to convey that private journals only become literature when written by a writer or a leader, and that they are typically published after the author's death. I was also hoping they'd get the message that I didn't want to read her notebook since it wouldn't change anything. What had been done was done. Everyone looked at me as if I had wished death on my ex. You could sense the animosity in the air, so I gave in and muttered, fine, fine. Promising to read the journal. You win some, you lose some, and then you use the incorrect words, resulting in even more losses. My ex is currently seeing a new therapist. She showed her parents the confirmation emails for her appointments. He's an older man with a white beard, much like Freud. I searched him up online. He is married, attends conferences and has written a couple books that are accessible on Amazon. Seems like a solid character. Then her parents said, "Can't you kids work this out?" That was the second thing that made me angry that day. As if this were child's play, and we should just listen to the adults since we were too young to control our emotions or judge what constitutes an irreversible betrayal. We were just kids who needed to work things out. So I reclaimed some ground after my earlier remark about the Dead Poets Society, and that was how the day concluded. We've known each other for 9 years and been in a relationship for 5. Even if there are real causes for her behavior, how can you return to normalcy? This was not even a reset. My perspective on my ex has shifted dramatically. She has become a stranger to me. Yes, I still find her appealing. Very attractive. There's no disputing how great she looked last Friday. But it was also calculated, I won't lie. Her hair was styled the way I like it, and she wore a dress I got for her as well as the shoes I prefer the most. I could even detect a bit of the perfume I had given her. The journal is on my nightstand. I have not read it and I doubt I ever will. I looked through it to see if it was actually a year old, and it is. As you work your way through the entries, you can see how the pages are folded and how the ink has aged. The pen she used was attached to the journal. When I examined it, it matched the ink, and the ink level appeared to be consistent with a year of use. It's not a forgery. Everything about it is compatible with a year of wear and tear. I don't see how reading it would help. It feels like a tool for playing with my psyche. Not really. I don't think she started writing it a year ago with the intention of using it for manipulation. If what she told me is true, her new therapist advised she share the journal with me. When people ask why the wedding is off, I tell them, we had a huge difference of opinion that we couldn't resolve. More or less. But if her sister discovers the true reason, which is likely given her tight relationship with their mother, everyone will find out soon enough. Our parents want us to meet again next week. They told me to read the journal, which might assist. Given our extensive history, perhaps we can work on it and start over. They believe she will receive therapy, recover, and remain the lady I fell in love with, just not right now. They can see I still adore her. Otherwise, I wouldn't be so theatrical. I don't think I'll meet them next Friday, but she did look stunning. I'd like to thank the community for their support and assistance. It's been enough to help me develop a strategy for dealing with the therapist. Thank you to everyone who shared resources and information about what to do next. What do I do with her journal? Return it, keep it, or read it 90 years from now? Update 2. The therapist no longer works at the facility. The clinic's lawsuit is most likely the primary motivator for this decision. Someone unrelated to my case has sued them. I don't have any other information. The therapist attempted to reach me but was unsuccessful. I believe she learned about my report on her and requested more information, but who knows? I didn't interact with her. She was blocked and her questions remained unanswered. A faint voice in the back of my head suggests that filing that report may not have been the best move. It could attract unwelcome attention, and the persons behind the lawsuit could approach me for assistance. Despite this, I can't keep a satisfied grin off my face, knowing that the therapist is in trouble. To those who have questioned whether I have emotions, if this isn't proof enough, I'm not sure what would. And I hope you understand sarcasm. Mela, on the other hand, complicates matters considerably. I added a brief update to my previous post concerning her journal. I decided to return it, and I was quite clinical in my approach. On Monday morning, the courier we use at work handed the journal to her. I attached a note explaining why I had not read it. Everything came down to her refusal to accept responsibility for the situation. By giving me the journal, I felt she was washing her hands of the situation, putting the duty of finding solutions on my shoulders. In return, I washed my hands of it. To be honest, I felt a pang of sadness the moment they told me the journal had been returned. Perhaps I should have read it. Later that day, Mela arrived at my workplace. She didn't cause a scene, nothing like that. She waited patiently in the lobby. Her goal was to wait until I ended my workday and then talk to me. Naturally, I discovered she was present quite quickly. My options were to send her away or talk to her. So we talked. Several architects planned the end of our relationship. 1. Stress. This was something I was aware of, but I had never recognized how serious it was. In retrospect, when she began seeking for a therapist to help with work stress, I should have been more conscious of the issue. But she always said everything was all right, so why shouldn't I believe her? Whether she was seeing a therapist or not, she had a breakdown at work that she kept hidden from me and her family. 2. Miscarriage. I may have become a father. She miscarried. She told me she was a few weeks pregnant and wanted to make it special. However, a few days later, she began bleeding and that was it. She never told me about it because she was worried I would think she was unworthy. She knows how badly I want to be a father, and she assumed this would lead me to believe she couldn't bear children. This idea is completely ludicrous. 3. Friends. I made it clear in the comments that we had friends in open relationships. One such acquaintance phoned Mela over a year ago and invited her to lunch. She quickly began venting her feelings over her broken marriage onto Mela. Her husband, like me, had far more lovers than she did. In my situation, there were 26 previous partners, her husband had 70. He demanded an open relationship from the day they married, and she has been miserable ever since. Apparently, Mela would face the same fate if she did not take care of me. This friend informed Mela that I exhibited the same symptoms as her husband before they married. 4. Family secrets. Those we love are not always who we believe they are. Our fathers work in academia and have known each other for 30 to 35 years. They routinely go to work-related gatherings and parties, usually with their wives. I met Mela at one such occasion. I went with my father to meet a professor who could aid me with my career. Mela was there instead of her mother, who had a scheduling conflict, or so she was told. Her parents were having a difficult time as a result of her father's infidelity. Mela just learned about this recently, when she discussed the concerns raised by the previously mentioned friend with her mother. This was a great shock for her. Her parents always appeared to be the ideal couple, a role model. They certainly patched things up and maintained the appearance of a wonderful marriage throughout. The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse combined with a therapist with questionable objectives, and that's how you end a relationship. The therapist was excited to plan my open relationship and validated what my friend had said. Men like me would never be pleased with only one woman. I would eventually seek more, and the only way to cure my cheating impulses was for Mela to sleep with other men until we evened out the numbers. Of course, I would be opposed to it, but that was okay. If I loved Mela, I could understand. This was a multi-layered concept. It would not only cure my alleged cheating conduct, but it would also affirm my love for her and enhance our bond. Naturally, this approach would have failed, and I believe that is precisely what the therapist was going for. Our relationship would not have survived. What the therapist did not foresee was how quickly I would react, or so I believe now. Mela and I met every day for the rest of the week, and she answered every question I asked her. One thing was clear, she was willing to fight for our relationship, whereas I was ready to leave things. At the end of the week, I had to depart for another city for work. The trip was intended to be 2 weeks, but it was extended to 4 weeks, more billable hours, heh. Before leaving, I gave Mela a copy of the therapy session tape. She knew I had it. It was one of the first things I discussed with her when she arrived at my employment on Monday. Listening to the recording rattled her to her core. What she remembered about the treatment session differed significantly from what was on the recording. I believe she finally understood where all of my acts and conduct towards her originated from. During those 3 weeks, I had little interference from anyone and was left to my own devices. It was wonderful. Several individuals in the comments offered me a beer if I ever visited their city, and I accepted. It was my first time meeting another Redditor, and surprise, he was not a weirdo. He and his wife were excellent individuals. Mela paid a visit in the 4th week. We had been in communication for the preceding 3 weeks, discussing a variety of things, most of which were about us. One important concern was finalizing our honeymoon plans. We were meant to go to France for 2 weeks following the wedding, but neither of us could go right away, so it was scheduled for 3 months later, and it was quickly approaching. We already had non-refundable travel tickets and hotel reservations, but we no longer had us. That 4th week, we chatted more and decided to go to France as friends. I can already imagine eyes rolling. But France was incredible. Visiting a place like that reminds you that the United States is medieval in comparison. Americans are easily identifiable in museums. To be honest, learning how to act in foreign nations should be required in our schools. We returned from France as a couple again. It wasn't due to the magic of Paris though. We're not back to our previous selves yet and there's more work to be done. Several points we agreed on, in no particular order. 1. Mela is seeking for a new work that is less stressful. 2. Our friends in open marriages have been branded a toxic influence, and we will no longer socialize with them. 3. We both like the name Mela, and it will be used for our first daughter, thank you France. 4. Never hide anything from your partner, such as a miscarriage. I'm quite upset about this one. 5. We'll acquire a dog and a cat. 6. Mela will keep seeing her current therapist for a time. 7. When we do marry, it will be a simple wedding with only our immediate family. 8. We'll probably visit Italy next. I suppose this is not the thrilling update everyone was hoping for. Many of you requested an update, and if you were hoping for rage, hatred or revenge, I'm sure there is a version of this story in which those things are feasible. But as I've stated from the start, I didn't detest Mela. My actions were based on self-preservation at the moment. Her behaviors indicated that she wanted something other than what I believed we both agreed on. There is no reason to be concerned about her mental state. When her therapist's impact faded, she returned to her previous self, more or less. These events have unavoidably altered her, but she is now in a better state. You'll recall that she promised me control over her finances, tracking her location and full access to all of her devices. Aside from my disinterest in such a lifestyle, those were simply attempts to continue the conversation. We agree to be open with our devices, but we have always been, so nothing has changed there. We will continue to share our finances, as we have always done. Thank you to everyone who left comments and sent me private messages. Some of the advice I received was invaluable, and I'm eternally thankful. Writing these pieces and interacting with you all has been quite therapeutic, a great way to relieve stress. I reluctantly agreed to an open marriage with my wife. When I fell in love with a coworker, my ex lost control and tried to ruin everything. I, 47, have been married to Lisa, 42, for 17 years, however we only lived together for roughly 7 years. A decade ago, I discovered Lisa cheating on me, and she admitted that she had fallen out of love and desired an open marriage. We have 2 children. The older was a toddler and the younger was still a baby when this occurred. It was heartbreaking to me. She stated that having back-to-back pregnancies had a negative impact on her physical and emotional health, and she wished to freshen up. Unfortunately, her method of relaxation was to bring various men into bed. Divorce was complicated at that stage, with 2 small children and a meager income. I decided to let her live her life as I relocated upstairs in our duplex home. We became co-parents for our children. It wasn't as hunky-dory as it seems. We split up with a lot of hatred and name-calling, largely from me since she cheated. But soon, we got caught up in work and life and I moved on and became more relaxed. A few months ago, I met Kathy, 35F, at work. She's my junior, and we hit it off immediately. Bonding with her felt more natural than anything I'd experienced in a long time. It wasn't a romantic connection at first. We connected as understanding co-workers and spent time together outside of work, still simply as friends. We made out last month and I had a unique feeling for her. She has been crashing at my apartment on a regular basis since then, which technically affects my wife. Lisa is still my wife and we are still married. Lisa has been acting strangely these days. Kathy hangs out with me and attempts to command authority like a wife. I had to remind her that we are separated, and I can live my life as she has for years. It is difficult to express what she has been doing, but I will try. Kathy and I were eating dinner one evening in my kitchen. Lisa arrived and asked, "Can I join you guys?" It became an extremely awkward time for both of us. Kathy and I gazed at each other, surprised. Lisa sat down with her dish without waiting for a response. We ate supper like strangers, smiling politely despite Lisa's forced chat. Our supper was ruined, but I gave Lisa the benefit of the doubt, believing she was simply trying to fit in. Then there was another incident in which she was bossy, attempting to impose her rights as a wife. Kathy and I were upstairs watching a movie when Lisa barged in and requested me to join her. When I questioned what was wrong, she answered, "Your children need you. The younger one needs your assistance with a scientific project." I was surprised since we had divided the schoolwork. I help the older child, and she takes care of the smaller. I informed her that I had already done my part for our eldest kid and that this was now her responsibility. She became enraged and exclaimed, "Is this kid not yours? Instead of assisting him, you're here lurking." This resulted in a full-blown confrontation between Lisa and me. Kathy, feeling embarrassed, excused herself and left. Kathy told me after that episode that she would no longer hang out at my apartment, though we continue to meet at hers. But why should I sacrifice my life when I've never touched hers? She's been living her life her way, bringing whatever male she wants into the house. And I've always looked the other way. Lisa is purposely attempting to break the link I've formed with someone. I addressed Lisa the other day, and she replied she wasn't worried by my close relationship with Kathy. She refused to accept her actions, claiming I was overthinking. I informed her that if she continued to intervene in my life, I would consider getting divorced. She had tears in her eyes and apologized for disturbing us. She was only worried about our son's unfinished assignment and was preoccupied with her work, so she asked me for assistance. I claimed it wasn't a call for help, it was nothing short of gaslighting. She then contacted Kathy, apologized and invited her to come over. Kathy accepted the apologies but set boundaries, explaining that she preferred to meet me at her home. I am currently in a difficult situation. I want to get rid of Lisa, but I'm worried she'll destroy my growing connection with Kathy. I'm thinking of obtaining a divorce. The only reason I didn't file for divorce back then was that I didn't want my children to have to pick between their mother and father. Now I'm contemplating if I should go forward with it and prioritize myself over everyone else, including my children. Should I wait a few years for my children to grow up before making a move? I'm not sure Kathy will wait for me till then. Oh, I'm still upset with Lisa over her decision to open the marriage. I'm also upset with myself for agreeing with her and not pushing back enough. Edit. Apologies for all of the jargon and missing facts, particularly on Lisa's adultery and our separation dynamics. People say it's tough to give counsel without clarity, so here it is. It'll be long, so skip it if you don't want to learn about the past. This was roughly 10 years ago, so I may have missed a few specifics. Lisa began acting up 4 months after our younger kid was born. She wouldn't let me get close and said she wasn't ready for sex. Pregnancy and breastfeeding had made her wary of closeness. I supported her decision, but we were slipping apart emotionally. I recommended we go to couples therapy, but she dismissed it, saying it was simply her postpartum phase and she'd recover shortly. It took almost a year before I lost patience and addressed her, stating that we needed to address the elephant in the room. She either attended therapy with me or gave me the truth about what was wrong. She gaslighted me, accusing me of being insensitive and other nonsense, but I refused to let it go this time and probed for the truth. I snooped through her phone but found nothing definite because she had deleted the majority of the chats and emails. I'm not sure how I got the clue, but one day she mentioned she was going shopping with her pals. I followed her automobile and discovered her infidelity. She was sleeping with a young college student. I knocked rather than barged into his residence. Lisa was on the couch in her lingerie, trying to cover herself, when a shirtless guy responded. I grabbed the guy by the neck and was ready to strike him when Lisa interfered, pleading with me to leave him alone. She cried, saying it wasn't his fault. He was only one of the guys she was hooking up with. It blew my mind. What the heck, one of the guys? She admitted to hooking up with several guys. The guy standing in front of me had no idea what was going on, or that she was married with children. We returned home, and I did everything any man in my position would do. No, I don't hit. I'm not a violent man. I contacted her parents and confessed the facts in front of everyone. I insisted on the divorce. I even engaged a lawyer and discussed the case, but as things went, the lawyer revealed the truth, which shook me. There was no genuine benefit for me, only loss. Because the kids were so young, they'd require their mother. At most, I could gain joint custody, but Lisa would have to allow me to meet with them and dictate the terms. Yes, I could take her to court if she didn't follow the court order. But how often does a regular man want to become engaged in legal battles? We live in a no-fault state, so there is no moral policing for her. I still have to pay alimony, and child support is required. So basically, I handle all of the tasks of a father, but I rely on Lisa to spend time with my children. Lisa, on the other hand, was opposed divorce. She proposed that rather than divorcing, we open our marriage and return to each other whenever we wanted. I knew I never wanted her back, but divorce was too expensive at the time. The only practical choice was to separate and live as housemates and co-parents with our children. So, we did it. Though she calls it an open marriage or whatever she wants, I consider it a failed strategy, and we have parted. Lisa has been with several partners over the last 10 years. Though she claims she had no significant relationships with any of them, I believe she had at least 3 sexual partners. They visited our house, and she went trekking and on vacation with them. It was difficult for me to see her bringing different guys into our home, first her adultery, then her multiple partners in our bedroom. We own a duplex house. I moved the guest bedroom upstairs. The stairs leading to it are accessible through the back door. We bought the property from an Asian couple who built it so their grown-up son could live upstairs in peace. Unfortunately, the son moved out, and the couple sold it to us since it was too big for them. The main entry to the house leads into a living room with a large closed kitchen, a dining area, a master bedroom, and a pantry that we converted into our children's room. Upstairs, there is a guest room the same size as the master bedroom, and the rest of the space is dedicated to a huge library area for reading and hosting parties. That space leads to the roof of the home, which has a little patio. Since I was moved upstairs, I could see much of what was going on downstairs. I hoped I could close my eyes, but for my children's sake, I remained attentive. I initially joined the dating scene, but after a few months, it felt hollow and useless. I discontinued it and concentrated on other important matters. I joined a badminton club to improve my athletic body. I had been a sports fan in college, so I returned to playing field games on weekends. I also joined a hiking club that plans solo hikes every 2 months. You cannot bring a friend, spouse, or someone you know. You hike alone, and there are others who do as well. It was tremendous fun. I did that for 2 years straight and now only do it twice a year. I've had a few hookups over the last 10 years, but no emotional affairs or long-term relationships. I didn't feel connected to anyone else. Kathy's situation is different. I feel good around her. She's the woman I believe I can give love another chance with. But now, Lisa, the devil of my life, has returned to hunt me down. The scenario remains the same. Kathy refuses to come to my apartment. I'm concerned she'll withdraw herself from me, and I don't want to lose her. The scenario forces me to choose between Kathy and my children, and I'm having difficulty making a decision. Update 1. Hello everyone. Thank you for all your suggestions and remarks. I appreciate everything, good and terrible. I sought therapy, which greatly aided me in determining my focus point and what I want out of life at this time. As several of you mentioned, the children are nearing their teen years, so it will only be a matter of a few years before they leave to lead their own lives. It makes no sense to pass up my chance to be happy with Kathy. I had an open discussion with Kathy. I told her about my feelings. I told her I wanted to be with her, and if she felt the same way we could work things out. She claimed she feels the same way but is hesitant due to my family dynamics. She simply does not feel comfortable around my legal wife. She is fine with the youngsters surrounding me, however. I said I could figure this out. I'm going to move out and the kids can choose where they want to live. They are mature enough to make that choice, and they can alternate between mom and dad's. Kathy agreed with the plan. My therapist proposed counseling for the children, in which they might be informed of our marital status in an age-appropriate way. Lisa flipped out when I informed her about the counseling. She stated I was being selfish and damaging our children's life by getting serious with Kathy, and that I should put my family first over my own selfish goals. I lost my cool at that. I asked, "Really, Lisa? Are you the one advocating family values and morality? What happened to your ethics while you were getting knocked up by various men when your children were still breastfeeding and rolling in their cribs?" I asked her to back off and brought the children to the counselor. It was useful. The children responded well and appreciated that we had banded together for their cause. They also agreed that I deserved to be happy for the rest of my life. I informed Lisa that I would be filing for divorce. She pretended to be surprised and began sobbing. She stated, "I thought we decided never to divorce and to be together throughout. Now that you have found this woman, you are leaving your family to be with her. I've also met a lot of men who wanted to marry me, but I never gave up my married life for them." I responded, "Stop trying to guilt trip me. This is not helping. Cut the bullshit and sign the paperwork. I'll be paying for the children's education until college and you can retain the house and the car. This will be your alimony. I will be moving out. I am prioritizing my pleasure over money because I can now afford it. Back then I couldn't." She cried and tried everything she could to convince me out of get divorced. She stated I could move out and live with Kathy while still married to her. I said, "I adore Kathy and do not want her to be dubbed my mistress. I know no one calls her that, but you would. You can go to any length to humiliate others. The paperwork should arrive any day soon. I'm moving in with Kathy next month. I am waiting for my children's annual tests to be completed. I'll be taking them on a trip and then moving out. I'll feel relieved when everything is settled." Update 2. I'm telling you, this woman is a true piece of work. As I said in my previous report, I was on holiday with the children. This woman seized the opportunity to carry out her nasty scheme. Lisa wept her way to Kathy, telling her to back off. She informed her that she was breaking up our family and that our children would suffer as a result. Lisa attempted to guilt Kathy, but when Kathy refused, Lisa said that I wasn't serious about her and that she was simply a fling for me. Lisa is a cunning, ruthless woman. She knows precisely how to play her cards. She knew I was in a low network zone with the kids, so she promised not to call me, and she didn't. If Kathy had been any other woman, she would have freaked out at the fling phrase. But she remained calm and waited for my return. She had my hotel number but did not bother me. That's what I admire about her. She's a confident woman despite my complicated situation. When I arrived home and learned of Lisa's spiteful move, I marched up to her door and yelled at her. I should have done this sooner to get the garbage out of her mind. Her entitled behavior has gone too far, and no one will tolerate it any longer. I have moved out of my house. My children have also decided to stay with me, but we do not have a spare room, therefore I'm looking for a larger property to accommodate them. Until then, kids are remaining with their mother. When I was moving out, Lisa performed a variety of tantrums, ranging from guilt-tripping to ranting, gaslighting to sobbing and pleading for another opportunity. She asked me to give our relationship one more chance. I told her that our relationship had ended 10 years ago. We were only housemates and co-parents. The truth is, I've moved on from loving her. She is nothing to me. I love Kathy and want to spend the rest of my life with her. When Lisa received the divorce papers, she tore them up. My lawyer had to issue her a letter threatening to sue her for destroying a legal document. Only then did she calm down and consent to sign them. The divorce proceedings are ongoing. I haven't followed up on my soon-to-be ex-wife since then. I went to pick up my children twice but did not enter the home. Yes, several of you inquired about my children's ages. They are now 11 and 13, mature enough to understand the divorce and separation. Update 3. I am pleased to inform you that my soon-to-be ex-wife, STBX, is now officially my ex-wife. The main point of this update is that the divorce is finalized and my children have moved in with me. They will visit their mother every 2 weeks or whenever they wish. The last month has been hectic, renting a house and relocating belongings. We didn't tell Lisa about the kids moving in with me until I rented a new house. We all knew she'd be upset, so we decided to wait as long as possible before telling her. The kids advised packing their bags and sneaking off with me when Lisa wasn't looking, but I chose to handle things legally. I did not want to get into another argument with that woman. According to our divorce agreement, we must give each other 3 days' notice if we intend to take the children for more than 2 days. So I returned home and informed Lisa that the children wanted to live with me and that I would pick them up in 3 days. As expected, she freaked out. Fortunately for us, she did not become violent, breaking things and all, which would have made things easier for us. Instead, she took the emotional way. She held the children, cried, apologized for everything, and begged them not to leave her. She did her best to emotionally manipulate them into staying with her. She was even successful with the younger child, who stated that he wanted to stay with Mama. Kathy had warned me that circumstances like these may occur, so I was expecting a last-minute change of heart. When my younger kid called, I told him, "Cool, Dad loves you no matter what." But my oldest son was strong in his choice to move out, so I answered, "Sure, I'll pick you up." I'm not sure what happened in the meantime, but when I went to pick him up, both boys were prepared with their luggage. I hugged both of them and led them away. I didn't inquire as to what had occurred. It was already upsetting enough for them, and I didn't want to further the situation. Kathy and I are attempting to make them feel at ease in our new home. We're involving them in the process of setting up their rooms, ensuring that everything matches their preferences. I expected Lisa to make one more effort to stop the children from leaving the house, but she had already given up. She simply sat there, crying and screaming. She hugged the boys firmly, apologized for her actions, and assured them that she loved them. She stated they were welcome to return to Mama's whenever they pleased. Before I departed, she asked if I had time for coffee. Her appeal sounded innocent and sincere, so I accepted. Her tone conveyed regret and she apologized. This time it did not sound false. She confessed, "I was delusional all along, thinking you would never leave me. When Kathy entered your life, I did not see her as a threat. I assumed she was simply one of those flings that will die out in a month. I believe I took you for granted because of the safety you gave for me and the kids, despite everything I did to you. I didn't realize I was mean and narcissistic until it was too late." I simply smiled and hid my emotions. I rose up to leave and she approached to hug me. I hugged her back. This was our first hug in 10 years. I can't really absorb how I felt about it, and I can't describe how I feel today following our final talk. I'm not pleased or sad, just numb. That's how it is. My life has changed dramatically during the previous 6 to 7 months. I suppose it will take time for me to process everything. Thank you all for your help, you've been the best. If anything changes from here, I may update the thread. My wife's affair was exposed by her own parents, now they want to disown her and leave me their $2 million inheritance. Should I accept it? My wife, Nicole, 27F, and I, 29M, had been married for a year before I filed for divorce after discovering she was cheating on me with one of her coworkers. Interestingly, it was my in-laws that revealed the affair to me and advised me to file for divorce as soon as possible. Nicole is the sole child of her rich parents, who run a large pharmaceutical firm. Nicole and I met on a dating service around 3 years ago and hit it off on our first date. After 1 year of living together, I proposed, and we married shortly thereafter. Her parents, whom I'll call Frank and Leah, were always quite nice and seemed to like me. Nicole always joked that I was the son they never had, and it truly seemed that way. They treated me like family from the moment I met them. They were warm, friendly, and grounded despite their affluence, which I greatly respected. I grew up in an emotionally unstable home. My parents did not love each other, but stayed together for my sake, resulting in regular arguments. Neither were affectionate, and while we are still in touch, family dinners feel more like chores. But Nicole's family was different. They felt like my own people, and I instantly relaxed around them. While I knew they liked me, I never dreamed they would support me over their daughter. My difficulty now is that Frank and Leah want to make me the successor to their inheritance as a result of Nicole's adultery. They want to compensate for what happened by paying me $2 million, while disowning Nicole in the process. I'm not sure if I should accept it because, in the end, the money is rightfully Nicole's, and I'm only being offered it because of her betrayal. Nicole is outraged at the scenario, and I am emotionally heartbroken. I had a lawyer look over everything, and it's a substantial sum of money that I would be taking away from Nicole if I accepted their offer. Despite how hurt I feel, I'm not sure if this is the appropriate thing to do. I obviously want the money, but I am conflicted. Nicole and I have always had a smooth and loving connection. We had little fights, as any couple would, but we worked them out. So when my in-laws invited me over to their house to talk about something important, I had no idea they'd reveal Nicole's infidelity. Nicole works for her father's company and is in charge of recruitment. Because it was a family business, they could easily keep an eye on her and observed she was spending a lot of time with one of the new hires. What made it even more horrible was that the man she was having an affair with was much younger than her. He had recently graduated from college and he was just 21. It was legal, but it seemed unusual that Nicole, although being happily married, felt compelled to pursue love outside of our marriage. Her parents had seen the growing intimacy between the two of them and even asked Nicole about it to be sure. She assured them that they were just close friends and that nothing untoward was happening. This worried her parents, not only because it would have an impact on our marriage, but also because it could lead to legal action. Nicole was in a higher position than the guy she was associated with, and if things went wrong, he could use it against the company and sue them. Despite her parents' persistent questions about their relationship, Nicole argued that it was entirely professional and that there was nothing else to it. Unfortunately, her parents found it difficult to trust her. Despite their cautions, Nicole continued to see him outside of work. They initially refused to notify me because they did not believe it was their responsibility. It was plausible that this was a harmless friendship. However, things escalated, prompting her parents to intercede. They hired a private detective to keep tabs on Nicole. They had no money issues and were able to hire a professional for the work. The detective discovered that Nicole was frequently visiting the other person after work hours. She would tell me she was with friends or at work, and I believed her, but her parents later disclosed that this was not the truth. Every day, once her workday finished, she would go over to his house and spend a few hours before returning home. We all knew that if she was lying to me, something was wrong. When I found out, I was devastated. I sincerely loved Nicole, and a part of me still does, but finding that she had been cheating and lying for months devastated me. This news came about a week and a half ago, and I still remember how upset I was during the meeting with my in-laws. They too were very saddened when they told me the truth, knowing Nicole would never confess. They believed it was best for them to come forward. Nicole had no notion her parents knew the truth. I was the first one they informed. I cried down in front of them, but they consoled me as if I were their own kid. They reassured me that it was not my fault and that they had seen how effectively I handled Nicole. This was completely her doing. She didn't appreciate the love she received from her parents and me and tossed it all away for someone she'd only known for a year. I stayed at their house that night because I couldn't bring myself to go home and confront Nicole. They kindly let me spend the night, and I cried the whole time. I was rattled up and unsure of what to do next. Logically, I understood the next step was to file for divorce, but my heart wasn't ready to give up on her just yet. The following morning, I decided to return home before Nicole went to work. I hadn't returned any of her calls or texts the night before, so she was astonished when I walked up just as she was ready to leave. I was plainly in horrible shape and she was concerned. I sat her down and asked her about the affair, as it was the most pressing issue on my mind. She hesitated and attempted to dispute it at first, but then I showed her the photos her parents had given me, shots showing her car parked outside her co-worker's house on the night she had told me she was working late. She tried to say they were just pals hanging around, but there was no reason for her to lie. Eventually, she was forced to reveal the truth. She had been cheating on me. I broke down as soon as she admitted. This time it was worse than previously since, when it was only her parents informing me, I still hoped it was a misunderstanding. Hearing that from Nicole herself shattered any denial I had. I was hysterical, and while I don't remember all I said, I do recall there was a lot of screaming and shouting. Nicole began to cry, confessing that she had been silly and lost sight of what was important since she had grown bored in our marriage. She stated that the affair meant little to her and that she never expected me to find out. It simply made matters worse. If it didn't mean anything, she had no reason to do it. I was shocked to learn that she had wrecked our marriage because she was bored. I recall yelling at her about how much I trusted her, how I had always been there for her, and how she had given it all up for someone she hardly knew. I yelled until she collapsed into a pool of tears. At one point, things became so severe that she collapsed on the floor, wailing with her head in her hands, while I screamed. It was a disaster, and just thinking about it makes me uneasy. Nothing about it seemed normal. When the ordeal ended, I informed her I was done and asked her to leave the house. She begged with me, claiming she would cease things with the other guy immediately and wanted another chance at our marriage. I informed her that as long as she was around, all I could think about was her affair. I needed time to comprehend things, which meant she needed to leave. More disagreements ensued, with her claiming that we could work things out and that remaining together was the proper thing to do. At the time, I was still battling to understand that she had cheated on me. The decision to work things out or leave her was secondary. First, I wanted to digest what had happened, something I couldn't do with her around. I didn't want to breathe the same air as her because she repulsed and irritated me so much. However, she refused to leave, which infuriated me to the point that I informed her I would leave instead. I couldn't take being near her anymore. She was still unhappy and told me I couldn't go because she wanted to work things out and stay married. She claimed it was all a mistake and I couldn't leave her for something like this. I didn't even respond, just left. I didn't bother packing anything and instead began driving aimlessly, unsure where to go. I didn't realize I'd have to stay there overnight until I ran out of gas. I drove to the nearest motel and have stayed there ever since. Despite my best efforts to forgive and forget what Nicole did, our relationship has not improved. I simply can't. So last week, after 3 days of deliberation, I filed for divorce. I hadn't spoken to Nicole since leaving the house, despite her attempts to contact me. The reality is, I have nothing else to say to her since what she did is something I can never forgive or forget. However, my in-laws have been in close communication with me, checking in on me on a daily basis to ensure my well-being. I've been talking to them since when I asked my own parents for aid. They weren't very helpful. They gave non-specific suggestions, such as do what feels right, which was neither comfortable nor useful. Feeling emotionally separated from my parents, I confided in my in-laws. I haven't told my pals yet, but I do need emotional support, which is why I've stayed close to them. Some people may find it unusual, but I'm extremely close to them and don't believe it's wrong. Nicole began messaging me more frequently after being served with the divorce papers, but I have yet to read any of her texts. I silenced her alerts so they wouldn't annoy me, but that doesn't mean I'd moved on. Everything still hurts. To make matters worse, I am also struggling at work. I had to take an unexplained leave of absence since I was unable to commute from the hotel, which is in the middle of nowhere. I am almost out of paid leave, and my employer recently called me to inform me that if I do not return to work soon, I will be terminated. This added to my worry because I have huge bills coming up. Divorce is expensive and I'll need to start looking for a new home to live. I had been discussing all of this with my in-laws in conversation, expecting little support. But they shocked me. They told me that Nicole had put me in this situation, and they would rectify it. I had no idea what they were going to do, but a few hours later, they requested me to come to their house right away. Nicole was present and they wanted us to sort things out, not necessarily about the divorce, but at least about who would reside in the house. They proposed Nicole stay with them, while I required the house to keep my work. I was hesitant to go because I did not want to confront Nicole, but my in-laws persuaded me, and I eventually accepted. When I arrived at their house, I was frightened to meet Nicole after such a long time, but I tried not to let it show. For the first several minutes, we avoided looking at each other. We didn't notice each other's existence until my in-laws began conversing. My in-laws offered that I take over the house so Nicole could live with them, which made sense given that they all worked in the same place. Losing the house would be a significant issue for me because it would mean losing my work without a solid place to live. Then, something unexpected occurred. Nicole began protesting that she did not see why she had to be the one to make such sacrifices. She said it was my fault we were divorcing and informed her parents that they, as her parents, should be on her side rather than mine. She accused them of supporting a cheater, which baffled us all. We stared at her, waiting for her to clarify what she was saying. Her tone was furious and full of conviction, and I began to believe she might have something to say that made sense. Unfortunately, she began spewing total rubbish, and I immediately knew she was just trying to make me look terrible in front of her parents so they wouldn't support me again. Nicole had no idea her parents had told me about the affair, so she probably assumed I had hired an investigator to collect those images myself. Nicole, completely oblivious of her parents' involvement, began fabricating a story, alleging that I was having an affair with a mutual friend. She stated she had noticed how cozy the two of us were whenever we hung together, and she even supplied manipulated images to make it appear as if I was romantically involved with my friend. Nicole stated that her own affair occurred because she was hurt after discovering my alleged adultery, and that she only went out with her coworker as a form of revenge. She explained to her parents that now that everything was out in the open, she expected them to kick me out of the house and cut relations with me. She insisted that they discontinue their friendship with me because she was convinced I had duped them into thinking I was the victim. Nicole also accused me of planning the meeting with her parents in order to portray myself as innocent and place all of the responsibility on her. At that point, I knew Nicole had made a serious mistake. She had just dug herself a hole with her lies, hoping to expose me and regain her parents' support. Given the circumstances, that was an extremely poor decision. Sure enough, her mother began ranting at her almost immediately, claiming she couldn't believe Nicole believed they'd fall for her falsehoods and badly altered images. Nicole was visibly moved by her mother's reaction, as she had clearly not expected it. Her parents indicated that they had expected her to be honest after being caught, but she had instead become a lying cheater. They even apologized, claiming that they had failed to raise her correctly if she had become this person. Then came the big reveal. My in-laws revealed to Nicole that they had informed me about her affair and handed me the images. There was no point in lying anymore because everyone knew the truth. Nicole's expression at that moment was priceless. A massive battle erupted, which was unavoidable. Nicole felt betrayed and despised the fact that her parents had always treated me as if I were their own son while willing to sell off their own daughter for my sake. Her parents, understandably outraged, called her stupid for not realizing sooner that they were the ones who informed me about the affair. After all, they had asked her about it several times, asking if she had a relationship with her coworker, which she had continuously denied. Nicole said that it had crossed her mind that her parents might have notified me, but she disregarded the possibility, feeling that as her parents, they would show her loyalty regardless of what she did. The dispute lasted a bit before Nicole rushed out, claiming she didn't want to speak to any of us anymore. She stormed out, plainly agitated because she'd had enough of everyone. I felt sorry for her because I could imagine how difficult it must be not to have your own parents on your side. After things had settled down, my in-laws informed me that they had made up their minds. They intended to modify their will and make me the sole successor to their inheritance, believing Nicole did not deserve it and that I was a better choice. It was a big decision, and I was hesitant to accept such a significant quantity of money knowing that it would essentially be stolen from Nicole. I told them I needed some time to think it over because it was a huge deal and I couldn't just agree without thinking about the repercussions. I wanted to make sure I was making the proper decision, so I requested time, and they obliged. They promised me that I would have plenty of time to make my decision. It's been a few days, and I'm still unclear whether it's the moral and ethical thing to do. While Nicole did break our marriage by infidelity, the amount I would inherit from her is significant, and I am not sure if it is fair. I've been thinking about it and am at a loss. That is why I am here. To determine whether it is okay for me to accept my cheating soon-to-be ex-wife's $2 million inheritance. Update 1. Thank you for your helpful feedback and support. I'm doing well emotionally, thanks to God. I've also talked to my friends about it, and they believe I should accept the money. After all, Nicole messed up, and if her parents want to make up by leaving me the money, I should let them. My buddies reminded me that Nicole not only cheated, but she also used false images to make it appear as if I was the one cheating. Her parents might have believed her if they hadn't already learned the truth. Nicole was ready to go to such efforts to avoid culpability, so I have no need to feel terrible about accepting the inheritance. I have made up my mind that I will not reject it. Nicole didn't care about my sentiments when she was out there destroying our marriage for a guy she barely knew. If she is going to be angry with anyone, it should be her parents, not me. Update 2. Today, I contacted my in-laws and informed them that I was willing to accept their offer. They were overjoyed and expressed gratitude for the opportunity to make things right following Nicole's actions. They informed me that Nicole had ceased contact with them and blocked them on all platforms following our argument at their place. She had also submitted her 2-week notice and quit her work, as had her affair partner. I was shocked. I knew Nicole enjoyed her profession, and I suspected her father was grooming her to take over when he retired. Now he must find someone else. Nicole is clearly eager to give up everything because she refuses to accept responsibility for her own acts. My father-in-law's voice seemed disappointed. Despite Nicole's mistakes, she remains their daughter and only child. It fascinated me that my in-laws emphasized doing the right thing over catering to their daughter's desires, which very few parents would do. I attempted to console them, but words weren't enough, so I decided to go see them tomorrow and spend some time with them. I know they must be lonely and hurt. Update 3. I've been staying in a motel for a few weeks now, after leaving my residence. Unfortunately, I was dismissed from my work, but the good news is that my father-in-law spoke with a friend and found me a far better job at his buddy's company. So I guess it's all okay in the end. The divorce proceedings have begun, and Nicole and I are pretty tense whenever we meet with the mediator. It's difficult for me to ignore her, but I need to. Nicole has already started dating and moved in with the other guy, which I know for a fact. I'm not shocked, but I am rather disappointed. I expected her to take longer to move on from me given how long we had been together. But it plainly didn't mean much to her, and I'm now trying to make sure it doesn't mean anything to me either. However, things with my in-laws are going well. We no longer speak to Nicole, nor does she speak to us. We try not to bring her up because it's a delicate subject for all of us. It's sad, but at least we're a family now. My in-laws haven't amended their will yet, but they intend to do so when the divorce is finalized, and they'll make sure Nicole isn't aware until after they're gone. We try to meet up frequently because we know we're all going through the same thing and can help each other. I hope it improves over time, and maybe someday it will. Family betrayed me in court for my son's custody, now they beg for help after my ex turned on them. I secretly recorded their confession. Hello, so this is going to be a little long because I need to include a lot of context for it to make sense. I, 33F, got divorced a few months ago, but it had been planned for over a year. I met my ex-husband James through friends when I was 25, and after 2 years of dating, we decided to live together and marry. His family was quite conservative and traditional, and they did not approve of live-in relationships, so we had to marry if we wanted to be together. I genuinely liked James, so I didn't mind marrying him. My parents supported our decision, so we married. Within a year of living together, I discovered that I was pregnant, and we were ecstatic. It seemed like our family was finally coming together and everything was falling into place. Unfortunately, after I revealed my pregnancy, my in-laws began pressing me to quit my career and focus on being a mother. It didn't help that my job was not very generous about maternity leave, and because I hadn't been there long, my leave would be especially brief. So at the time, I considered the advantages and cons and decided to leave my work. I didn't make this decision alone. James and his parents were convincing me it would be the greatest decision in the long term, so I just had to do it. James appeared assured and promised to take care of the family. I didn't have to worry about money. He'd bring enough home, and my sole attention would be on raising our child. My parents and older brother both agreed it was best if I stopped my job and stayed at home, like my mother had done. She elected not to return to work because family was her top concern. With pressure from both sides of the family, I chose to quit during my second trimester. Everything appeared to be in order, and I had complete faith in my husband to not let me down, so I quit my booming career to become a stay-at-home parent. However, shortly after my kid was born, I observed something peculiar about James's behavior throughout the latter months of my pregnancy. I couldn't put my finger on it, but his vibe felt odd. Sure, he seemed joyful when our baby was born, and I expected things to return to normal, but unfortunately, they worsened. He got angry around me, and if I tried to speak with him, he snapped. He only seemed genuinely happy when he was playing with our son. Aside from that, it seemed like he was constantly annoyed to be at home with me. He started working longer hours, and even on weekends, he made excuses not to spend time with me. I didn't understand what was wrong, but I kept trying to make our marriage work. Unlike him, I still loved him and refused to give up on us. This pattern persisted for around 2 years following my son's birth. James stayed at work longer than required, and even when he came home, he wasn't truly with me. I couldn't really complain since whenever I tried to talk to him, he said he was too exhausted from work. And it was not an easy chore for him to be the sole breadwinner for the household, which was really disrespectful to me because I was perfectly capable of earning money for myself. But I had to rely on him since he promised to make things easy for me. I even asked him a few times if he would rather that I return to work so that we could split the bills and he didn't have to face all of the pressure. However, he claimed that would be an insult to him and his abilities, and that his parents would never accept. We'd have a difficult time with them if I went back to work. So I stayed at home and raised my son, which was the only thing that made me happy because James had changed. He was no longer the man I'd married. About a year ago, I discovered that James had an affair with one of his co-workers. It was quite difficult for me to find this because I had been skeptical for quite some time. I even snooped through his phone and laptop while he was sleeping and discovered nothing. I knew all of his passwords because he had written them down in his notepad, but that didn't help. It almost seemed as if he had nothing to conceal, and I began to feel dumb for being cautious. I even searched through his possessions for a burner phone or anything odd, but I found nothing. I began to suspect that I was being overly paranoid and insecure. But as luck would have it, I witnessed his cheating firsthand. About a year ago, James and I were organizing a spectacular birthday celebration for our son. He'd invited the coworker he was fooling with. She was a single mother with a youngster around our age, so I wasn't surprised she got invited. James had informed me she was a very close friend, so I saw nothing wrong with her being there. After my son had cut his birthday cake, I went upstairs to change into more comfortable attire for the celebration. When I got into my bedroom, I saw James and his coworker making out. She was seated on his lap. It took me a few minutes to grasp what I saw. First and foremost, it was in my bedroom, which exacerbated the situation. Second, they did not even pause when they heard the door open. I had to walk up to them before they noticed I was there. I'm quite sure they felt it was great to make out in my bedroom, at home, just for the thrill of it. But they obviously did not anticipate me to have a complete breakdown. I'm not proud of it, but discovering that what I'd believed for so long was true sparked something inside me. I grabbed the coworker's hair and began dragging her out of the room. According to what I was later told, James is physically stronger than me, but he was unable to stop me. I can't recall much of it since I had a rage blackout. I carried her downstairs, James following behind me, and tossed her in the center of the room when everyone was still present. I don't recall much of what I said, but I supposedly called her various disparaging names and informed everyone what she and James were up to in my bedroom. I didn't care if my kid or his pals were present. Looking back, that was really uncomfortable and inappropriate, but I didn't consider it at the time. I screamed at the top of my lungs. My parents, brother, and in-laws were all present. My father eventually calmed me down and returned me to my room. Once inside, I completely broke down and sobbed uncontrollably. But rather than staying with me to console me, my father locked me in my room and returned downstairs. I should have known then that my parents did not genuinely care about me. I knew they were more concerned with appearances than reality, but this was absurd. Nobody came to check on me over the following several hours. Even after I calmed down, I had no idea what was happening outside. I didn't have my phone, so I couldn't reach anyone. It wasn't until after midnight that my brother unlocked the door and allowed me out. He didn't even inquire how I was. They probably would have kept me in the room longer if I hadn't started banging on the door like a crazy lady. When I got out, I asked my brother what had transpired since I was locked in. He informed me that practically everyone had fled following my collapse. He also told me James had departed with his parents and our children. My parents, brother and I were the only people left in the house. My brother let me out to discuss what we should do next. But in my family, discussion means telling me what to do. They informed me that I needed to apologize to everyone for how I had behaved at the party. Not only that, but I also needed to apologize to James and his parents. Apparently, James had difficulty convincing his coworker not to file charges against me because what I did to her was technically an act of physical assault. My family told me that I owed it to James to speak things out and work on our marriage rather than making this a bigger deal. I lost it. I screamed at them to leave my house because I was not about to allow anyone stand under my roof and order me to apologize to my unfaithful spouse. I got into a heated argument with my family because they told me that I owed it to James to make things right and give the marriage another try, or they would sever ties with me. So I told them to go ahead since I had gotten to the point where I didn't care what anyone thought of me. I was going to file for divorce and get out of this situation without anyone's approval. I phoned a lawyer the next day and filed for divorce less than a week after the occurrence. James was served shortly after, and he had the arrogance to express disappointment and disbelief. He returned home the same day he was served with the divorce papers and demanded an explanation. I told him I was not going to take him back after what he had done and how he had disrespected me. We had a nasty verbal argument in which I called him a lot of names, and he promised me that I would never see my son again. I had no idea he would actually keep his word. Then the legal struggle started. We had very few common assets, so the divorce proceedings were far smoother than the custody battle. The house belonged to me because I bought it with my own money, and there was no doubt about that. Everything else was to be auctioned with the earnings divided between us. We only had to wait the 6-month waiting time mandated by the state, after which the divorce would be finalized if a settlement was made. The only disagreement was about alimony. Because James forced me to quit my work and I didn't have enough money. I needed alimony to start anew. He, however, believed that I should not receive any alimony at all. Fortunately, I had a few texts that demonstrated he had promised to support me. Otherwise, I might not have received any. The divorce process was easier for me emotionally because I had already distanced mentally from James. However, it was the custody struggle that truly killed me. Unfortunately, my parents and brother stabbed me in the back for cash. My ex-husband and his lawyer were nasty, and they started building a case against me, painting me as an unstable, reckless, and insane mother. They wanted to show that I was unfit to raise our son alone, so James and his parents should gain full custody. I assumed my parents and brother had been bought off by my ex-in-laws because they were wealthy, and I couldn't think of another reason for my own family to turn against me. I'm very sure my family warmed up to my in-laws from the start because of their money. James accused me of being a functioning alcoholic with serious rage issues. They made up situations in which I allegedly lost my temper and endangered my son, even though none of this had actually occurred. They needed to portray me as the villain. I expected some people to side with me, but all of my friends supported James, which I believe was owing to my breakdown at my son's birthday party. The worst betrayal, however, occurred when my parents and brother testified against me in court, stating I needed rehab and intense therapy before being permitted to see my son. They even suggested that James cheated because he was tired of coping with my unpredictable behavior. Despite a good fight with my counsel, I was unable to win custody of my son. The odds were stacked against me, and there was little I could do to prevent the inevitable. My lawyer and I worked hard to gather proof to prove I was a decent mother, but it all went to waste. The decision was revealed a few months ago, and it was the last time I saw my kid in person. I was granted supervised visiting privileges, but James never let me see him. It was pointless. My son is now 4 years old, and I'm constantly concerned that he'll forget me. According to a few relatives that remain on my side, my family continues to see my son. They routinely publish images with him, but I can't see him. James and my son live with my in-laws, and it appears that everyone but me gets to spend time with him. I cannot imagine something more heartbreaking. I've been living on memories of my son, thinking James was taking excellent care of him. I don't think I could have provided a comfortable life for him on my current pay, given I've only lately resumed working. I got a job at a friend's startup, but it doesn't pay well. Most of the employees are in their early 20s, working for experience and expecting to advance to better chances. Although I receive alimony, it is insufficient to maintain my previous lifestyle. I can't cut expenditures like a bachelor, but it's all I have right now. I had wanted to reapply for joint custody once my life was in order, but an unexpected chance presented itself a few weeks ago. My parents contacted me after months of silence to ask for assistance. It turned out that James was not the fantastic man they thought he was. My brother sent me an email requesting that I come over to their place since they had realized something crucial and wanted to come clean. They were tired of keeping secrets from me and wanted to be a part of my life again. I tried to ignore the email, but I couldn't quit thinking about how this might help me get my son back. So I went to their place that evening. I anticipated them to be living like kings after selling me out for money from my ex-in-laws. However, they were actually living in worse conditions than previously. My son, on the other hand, was overjoyed to see me, which added to an already wonderful evening. When I visited my family that day, they practically began pleading for forgiveness as soon as I walked in the door. Apparently, they recognized how severely they had messed up and there was no turning back, yet they still wanted me to forgive them. After the divorce, when my ex-in-laws and James were approached about the money they had been promised, James informed my family that it was no longer occurring. Apparently, they had just been told that they would be well compensated if they turned on me and testified in their favor. However, there was no written evidence to support it. If my relatives tried to go back and inform me about everything, James and his family would make sure they never saw my son again. So, for the protection of my son, they agreed to keep their mouths hidden, even though they had not been paid as promised. But things grew worse. They were not only pushed into testifying against me, but they were also treated as free babysitters. Every day, James would drop off our boy at my parents' house and they had to watch him while giving up their own time. It was really inconvenient because both my father and brother had jobs to attend to, and my mother couldn't handle all of the housework and caring for her grandchild on her own because she was getting older. So either my father or brother would have to work from home every day, which was growing increasingly tough for them, which is why they approached me to finally put an end to it. Apparently, they wanted to make a deal with me. They told me that if I provided them the money my ex-in-laws promised, they would represent me in court and ensure that I got custody of my son. I was going to recommend it myself, but it wasn't unexpected that they did. My family had always been materialistic, and this was especially true now that my father's business had failed and they were back to working for other people. Obviously, they would want money more than ever now because my father wanted to retire but didn't have enough saved because he had invested all of his money in the firm, which eventually failed. They claimed they could make up a tale about how they were forced and coerced into testifying against me so they wouldn't be charged with perjury while under oath. They were unaware that I no longer required their assistance. I had been recording everything they said since the moment I came inside the house, since I suspected something was wrong and didn't want to take any chances. So I had already recorded everything. Nonetheless, I encouraged my family to give me screenshots if they had any to prove they had been used and lied to, and I promised to help them. Following that, I departed. I'd already seen my son, and I had more than enough evidence to seek custody again. So that's what I did the next day with my lawyer. This time, I was ready. The custody lawsuit is still ongoing, but one thing is certain. I will be able to prove that none of the accusations James made against me were accurate, and that my family had been lying about everything all along. I've already listened to the recording, which has greatly influenced my decision. James and his lawyer are literally rushing for evidence, while I take it all in and enjoy the show. This is what they made me go through the last time, and now I get to do it to them. It's karma at its best, and I couldn't be happier. The only thing that hasn't been ideal is that my family has said I used them, just like James did, and that I had no right to record them without their permission and use it against them. However, in my state, that is perfectly legal and acceptable in court. I had no idea what they were talking about until they told me I had broken their trust by recording them. Bold statements from those who broke my confidence by siding with my ex-husband in the custody dispute. They believed that what I did was wrong because what they had done was out of necessity. They needed the money. But I didn't need to screw them over and expose them to perjury. They stated they had already committed to assist me and testify against James and his family, so I didn't need to go behind their backs. They keep contacting me, and it's becoming increasingly difficult for me to ignore. So am I a jerk for going over my family's back and putting them in danger of being charged with perjury? Update 1. Hello everyone. The custody dispute is still ongoing, and James and his lawyer are working tirelessly to show that they have been speaking the truth. Of course, they might be charged, and since it is a criminal, they could face jail time. But it is not my business right now, and it should not have been at any time. I'm not sure why I was worried about my parents when they obviously weren't concerned about me when it was my turn. So it's basically tit for tat right now. The comments section made me realize how entitled my parents were. Anyway, I've terminated connections with them. They can all go wherever they choose. I want my son to be okay and with me. I've waited long enough for this, and I'm not going to allow my family's victimization of themselves to stop me. If they can sell me out for money, I don't think I need to be loyal to them. I am done now. Update 2. So the good news is that I've finally gotten custody of my son. I don't think I've ever been this happy in my life. The second good news is that my in-laws, James and my family, have been charged with perjury and they may face jail time. I'm sure they're regretting everything now, but I don't care since I got what I wanted. My son back, which was all I ever asked for. According to what I know, James is still attempting to fight it and avoid jail, but I don't think it will work. I've already applied for a restraining order against all of them because I've been receiving extremely frightening text messages, and I'm certain it's from these folks. Nobody else would want to hurt me, unless it was them. Things have been really busy and crazy over the last several weeks, but I'm finally learning to slow down. I badly want to spend more time with my son, therefore I chose to shorten my working hours. I've also considered selling my property and moving to a smaller apartment to save more money. I still have a lot of work to do. Repairing my relationship with my son will not be an easy process. Even though he is glad to be with me, he continues to inquire about his father and grandparents, and I am at a loss for words. He's told me a few things about them, such as how he spent the majority of his time with his grandparents and how his father and my in-laws were only available for a portion of the day. When I ask him how it was living with his grandparents, he makes a face and says it wasn't very good since everyone was continuously fighting. I completely get that. It sounds like they treated him poorly because they refused to accept responsibility. I can't comprehend why they'd treat a youngster that way, but I wouldn't put it past them. They are undoubtedly capable of making even a young child feel horrible about himself. But I don't have to worry about it anymore because he's with me. Update 3. Hello everyone. I can't believe I've returned here after nearly 5 years. My life is so different right now that it feels unreal. 5 years is a long time, and a lot has changed, the first being my son's age. We have a wonderful connection right now, and after many therapy sessions, he and I have finally become the mother and son we should have been from the start. He's growing into a wonderful man, and I'm confident he'll be nothing like his father. I simply know it in my heart. He's 9 years old and already a wonderful gentleman. I'm parenting him on my own, and I have full custody because James gave up and moved to Europe after getting out of jail. I cannot say I am surprised. He left with his co-worker, who he had been cheating on me with, and they are now married. I guess he merely replaced his biological son with another child. It's terrifying, but that's the type of person he is. My parents and my brother were released from jail after 6 months of good behavior. We haven't communicated, and they didn't try to contact me when they were freed, which I appreciate because I doubt I would have had much to say to them anyway. I have no news regarding my in-laws. I haven't heard from them in years, and that's for the best. I believe I am living a life now. God has blessed me with a solid job and a consistent salary. I'm still working at the company I started with, my friend's business, and it's doing pretty well. So life worked out beautifully for me and my son, and it was more than I could have hoped for. I am very appreciative of everything. I couldn't give them grandchildren, so my parents convinced my husband to leave me. They were shocked when I had a baby girl 3 years later. So, I, 30F, recently ran into my parents and ex-husband Scott, 33M, and I'm not sure how I feel about the encounter. For reference, my parents and I have not spoken in almost 3 years, and neither has my ex-husband. We split 3 years ago and have not communicated since then. In fact, I've done all in my power to avoid seeing them again because they devastated my life and mental health while I was still with them, to the point that I felt like I didn't deserve to exist. After my divorce, I went to the suburbs and sought to create a different life for myself, away from everyone and everything associated with my past. So running into them recently was a great surprise for me, and I said some things to them that I'm not sure were the best move for me. My parents had always desired a boy. It's not that they mistreated me growing up, but it was clear to me that they would have treated me differently if I had been a boy. My mother had even mentioned it on multiple occasions, and I had tried my hardest to be the son they never had, but I was unable to achieve. After graduating from college and moving out, I tried to stay in touch with my parents because, no matter what, they were still my family and the only family I had. I wasn't really close to my grandparents, and I didn't have any uncles or aunts who would look after me. So I accepted my fate. No matter how much they pushed me away, they were still my soul family, and even if they did not appear to be interested in staying in touch with me, I attempted to retain contact. When I was about 23 years old, I began dating Scott. We met at a concert and had an instant connection. After 6 months of dating, I introduced him to my parents, and they began to make more of an attempt to communicate with me. They would call me more frequently, inquire about my relationship, and generally show more interest in my life. I had noticed the difference, but because it was welcome, I didn't give it much thought and simply accepted it. The longer I dated Scott, the more involved my parents were in my life. At one point, it seemed like we were all one big happy family. I was overjoyed since it was everything I had ever desired, so I didn't question it, even though I should have. After a little more than 2 years of dating, we became engaged and married after 3 years together. After we married, things were going well for a time, and I was enjoying my life as a newlywed. However, 6 months after my wedding, my parents began hinting that they wanted a grandchild. I was only 26 at the time, and I wasn't quite prepared. I wanted to wait a few more years before trying for a kid, but at their suggestion, I spoke with Scott, who was all for the notion of establishing a family. Because of his eagerness, we decided to begin trying for a baby immediately after our wedding. We tried for a long time, but after several months, we were still unable to conceive. We began to suspect that anything was wrong and opted to be tested. Unfortunately, I found out that I was infertile. It was a great shock for both of us, but my parents were even more disappointed, and they didn't even try to hide it. My father went away instead of comforting me when we told both of our parents. We decided to stop trying for a while, and Scott and I spoke about attempting other methods, such as IVF. However, this would be extremely costly, and success on our first effort was not certain. So we had to postpone our plans to raise a family until we had saved enough money to cover multiple rounds of IVF. We were satisfied with that, despite our initial disappointment. However, my parents were really dissatisfied. They stopped visiting and talking to me, and no matter how much I tried to explain that this wasn't all my fault, they weren't ready to listen. After a few weeks, I was so disappointed by their actions that I called them and vented. I told them they had been treating me unfairly since I couldn't give them a grandchild right now, which made me wonder if they were really capable of being decent grandparents when I did have a child. I informed them that they had always treated me cruelly because I was not a boy, and I saw how differently they treated my spouse. For a long time, I attempted to ignore it and keep our friendship going, but now I'm not interested in keeping in touch with them and would rather that they stay away from me forever. It was difficult for me to express that since for so long, all I wanted was their acceptance. But now I recognize that it was nearly impossible. Instead of apologizing, they escalated their actions and were happy with me not speaking to them again. They told me I was worthless as a woman since I couldn't have children, and they wanted nothing to do with me. It was painful to hear them say that, but at least I knew where I stood with them. After that phone call, I did not talk with my parents again, and we were done. When I told Scott about the phone call, he was sympathetic at first, but after a few days I saw that his attitude toward me was shifting. I ignored it at first because I was already going through a difficult time mentally, and I didn't want to accept that my spouse might leave me. So I started pretending that nothing was going on and that everything was fine. Within a few months, he had changed entirely and was constantly chilly to me. I tried everything I could to save our relationship, but nothing worked. 3 months later, he returned home with the divorce papers and announced that he was done with me. I couldn't say I was startled, but I did try to reason with him. I told him we could always try for a kid later, but he stated he had a lot of reasons to leave and didn't want to talk about it. He wanted it to end as quickly as possible because it was difficult for both of us. The divorce took nearly 7 months to finalize, and they were the most difficult months of my life. I was absolutely alone, and I had broken down. To make matters worse, a few weeks after he informed me that he wanted a divorce and had moved out, I learned from a few relatives that Scott was supposedly living with my parents. I knew talking to them wouldn't help, so I decided to speak with my in-laws about it. It was an unpleasant chat, but they informed me that my parents had been in contact with Scott for several months. I suppose they had been brainwashing him into leaving me, which is why Scott decided to leave, even though my in-laws thought it was a bad idea. He had argued with them and stopped speaking to them. I'm not sure what they told Scott, but my in-laws informed me that Scott implied my parents had said he deserved better. So I'm still not sure what they told him, but I think they were just desperate to have a son in any way possible. Since I was no longer speaking to them and they couldn't hope for a grandchild from me, they quickly decided to take Scott under their wing and get him to leave me. My divorce left me extremely damaged, and it took me several months to get back on my feet, but I did it. Since then, I have not looked back and have done everything in my ability to forget the past and go forward. After my divorce, I moved to the suburbs. I started a new job, changed my appearance, and blocked my parents and Scott on social media. I also told all of my former friends and relatives that I never wanted to hear anything about them again, and I didn't want them to know anything about me. Everyone respected it. For the past 3 years I've been in treatment and doing well. The only thing that bothered me was the absence of a baby. I still desired a child despite the fact that I no longer had a husband or parents. I felt like I was ready to become a mother. Last year, I began IVF procedures and became pregnant with the help of an anonymous donor. 4 months later, I gave birth to my beautiful girl. Life has been very good since she was born, and I'm very pleased. 4 days ago, I was walking down the street with her when I ran into my folks and Scott. I was astonished to find them on my street. I believed they were come to visit me, but then I noticed they were stepping out of a residence a few blocks away. When they saw me, I froze. I should have returned home, but I simply couldn't bring myself to do so. They approached me, greeted me, and immediately inquired about the baby, as they were aware that I was infertile. I responded truthfully, and by that point I had comprehended what was going on and began walking back home. But Scott stopped me and said he was delighted he ran into me because he had been thinking a lot about me lately. They had apparently come to visit his aunt, who had recently moved into the neighborhood, and he took bumping into me as a message from the cosmos that he should make things right and give our relationship another opportunity. My parents were also standing there and they demanded that I invite them home to talk about all that has been going on in my life, as they had clearly missed out on a lot. I was shocked that they were even suggesting this, let alone that they expected me to allow them in after everything that had transpired in the past. It took me 3 years to move on from everything, and I'm still in therapy trying to work through my emotions. So I had an outburst. I told them I'd rather have a lot of murderous wild animals in my house than them, since they'd still be better. I told them to quit acting like they cared about me or what was going on in my life, since the only reason they wanted to talk to me now was that I had a baby. My parents wanted to talk to me because they were finally going to have a grandson, and Scott wanted to talk to me because, clearly, he couldn't find anyone else. He assumed that because I had previously been able to conceive, getting pregnant again would be easy, and he could just return to my life. It was sickening that they only regarded me as a supply of babies, not a human person with real emotions. They had all abandoned me when I most needed their emotional support. Even though I had expected this from my parents, who had made it plain throughout my upbringing that they would have chosen a boy, it was nonetheless shocking. They believed that a woman's worth was determined by her ability to be a mother. The big surprise, though, was Scott. He had spent so many years with me and soothed me, but he had still gone along with whatever my parents suggested for some strange reason and abandoned me when I was at my lowest point. I hadn't forgotten anything they'd said to me, so I just repeated everything back to them. Since I was worthless as a woman and Scott deserved better, perhaps they should leave me alone now. I've always been a quiet and shy person, but when they confronted me on the street that day, I yelled at them from the top of my lungs. It was the culmination of 3 years' worth of rage, so it was quite unpleasant. After I finished ranting at them, I dashed back to my house and closed the door as quickly as possible. I was feeling quite bad after that, so I opted not to go to work for a few days and have stayed at home with my baby ever since. Since then, my interactions with my parents and Scott have played over and over in my mind. I honestly had no idea what I was going to do about it until last evening, when I got a call from an unknown number. I'm not sure why, but I decided to answer the phone yesterday. Normally, I don't answer calls from unknown numbers. It was Scott on the other phone, and I could hear my folks whispering in the background. I'm very sure they weren't attempting to be quiet, they just wanted me to know they were there. Anyway, I tried not to be too impacted by it. I just informed him that I did not want him to phone me again because otherwise, I would have to take preventive measures against him, which I did not want to do. I reminded him that the same thing applied to my parents. I didn't want anything to do with them, and the only reason I answered the phone was to inform them that I was done. I had finished 3 years ago and was still clinging to it. But Scott told me to hear him out, and I couldn't bring myself to hang up, so I let him speak. He admitted to me that he, like my parents, had made mistakes, but it was out of disappointment. He mentioned that both my parents and he were looking forward to beginning a family, having a baby and so on. They struggled to accept the fact that I was infertile and hesitant to do IVF until we had saved enough money. They hadn't handled it well, but they wanted another chance to prove they were worthy of being in my life. After a few seconds, I informed him I didn't want any of the rubbish they were selling me. They wouldn't have cared about me if they hadn't seen me carrying a kid that day, and that was the bottom line. That was the truth, and I was sick of them pretending otherwise. I was about to hang up when my parents spoke out from the background, saying that this was exactly the type of behavior that had caused them to cut me off in the first place. Apparently, they thought I was selfish and just concerned with myself when I discovered I was infertile. They said that instead of giving everyone their space, I constantly forced my presence on them and tried to get them to comfort me and pay attention to me, despite the fact that they were dealing with the news themselves. That, they explained, was why everyone had pushed me away, leaving me with no one to turn to. I didn't continue the conversation after that. I simply hung up. I know they were just attempting to dupe me, but I can't help but question myself now. So for my own peace of mind, I need to ask, am I to blame since I sought reassurance after learning that I was infertile? Edit, first and foremost, many people questioned why my parents had not tried for another child after I was born, especially because they desired a boy so much. My mother experienced a lot of issues with her first pregnancy, so the doctors advised her to wait a few years before trying again. But even when my mother had me, she was in her mid-30s. Waiting a few more years would have put my mother in her late 30s, making the pregnancy considerably riskier. My mother had a tough time conceiving me, just as I had battled and eventually discovered I was infertile. The only difference was that while she was struggling, her mother-in-law was rude to her. But this time, it was my own mother who couldn't stop thinking about how I felt. Anyway, that was the reason they couldn't have another kid and were left with only me, a girl. I'm not sure what kind of relationship Scott had with his parents, but from what I saw, they seemed to get along nicely. As of now, I'm not sure if they've been able to reconcile following their recent fallout, because I haven't contacted his parents and, obviously, haven't spoken with Scott about it. Scott is an only kid, so he didn't face any competition. When I visited his parents, I could tell they loved him and had treated him well since boyhood. So I'm not sure why he became so attached to my parents. At least with my parents, I knew they wanted a son, which explains why they started treating Scott that way. But with Scott, I'm not sure what went wrong. I've spent the last 3 years trying to forget about everything, so I hadn't given it any attention or questioned it. But now that you've brought it up, I feel compelled to speak with my ex-in-laws to get to the bottom of it, if only for my own curiosity. Anyway, I hope this answers any questions. Update 1. I decided to speak with my ex-in-laws to find out why Scott has been acting the way he has. To be honest, I couldn't think of a single reason why he needed to go visit his aunt with my parents. It was simply bizarre. I already knew it wasn't my fault. They had deserted me when I needed them because they are bad people, and I knew they were only attempting to gaslight me. I just wanted reassurance and didn't want to bother my friends with it because it was too personal, so I shared it here. So, thank you to everyone who informed me that I wasn't the terrible guy here. It was weird reaching out to them after 3 years of no communication, especially because the last time I spoke with them was around the time of the divorce. Fortunately, they were pleased to hear from me. After some small conversation, I came right to the issue and inquired why Scott was so close to my parents, and if they had contacted him. They told me that a few months after their last battle, they had reconciled with Scott and were now in contact with him. However, he had kept in touch with my parents. They clarified that Scott was adored as a youngster, so he wasn't attempting to replace his parents with mine. However, my parents had been suspicious since the start of our relationship. Even when we were dating, they attempted to persuade him to join them. Scott had informed his parents that my parents would periodically invite him to supper, even when I was busy, and that he would accompany them alone. He thought this was something to brag about because he believed he had impressed my parents simply by being himself, which was partially correct. Being a guy was enough to impress them. They had already spent a lot of one-on-one time together without my knowledge, and Scott had begun to look up to them as parental figures, despite the fact that he had his own parents who he respected. It was very complicated. On top of that, my parents were continually showering him with expensive presents and writing him checks. That was the money Scott offered to use for IVF while we were together, but I assumed he was joking because we didn't have that much money. I never wanted him to do anything dirty for money, and he didn't want to tell me that he had gotten a large sum of money from my parents since it would have forced him to reveal the nature of his relationship with them. Even after that, I declined to go with IVF because I did not believe he had the funds and I wanted to save. My parents used that to persuade him to oppose me, claiming he deserved better, someone who believed in him. Within a few months, they were able to brainwash him, and he eventually left me. My ex-in-laws apologized to me, but said that while they disagreed with Scott's relationship with my parents, he was their only son, and they couldn't cut him off either. I don't blame them, they owe me nothing, and they were only being helpful by speaking the truth. Now that I know the reality, I see no need to entertain any of them if they contact me. They're all horrible people that don't deserve my attention. Update 2. I finally decided to return to work after nearly 2 weeks off. Fortunately, I have plenty of maternity time left because I did not take the entire 6 months off in one go, and my company's policy is flexible. While I was at work, just my daughter and her babysitter remained at home. I trust the nanny totally because she has excellent recommendations and I know her personally. She's an excellent woman. She called me about halfway through the workday. She quickly informed me that she had moved my kid to her own home since she was unsure whether staying at my place was safe given my ex-husband's conduct. I consented and let her take my daughter home, guaranteeing their safety, and then contacted the cops as I drove home. On the phone, she told me that Scott had been outside for a few minutes, yelling for me to come out. When he learned I wasn't home, he attempted to kick down the door. He was cursing loudly and my daughter was sobbing, so my nanny called me right away so I could notify the police. She exited through the back door and strolled to her home via the backyard gate, as she lived only a few minutes away. That way, my baby could be safe while I dealt with my ex-husband and the cops. To be honest, compliments to her. Her primary goal was my child's safety and well-being, which was appropriate. When I got home, the cops had already arrived, and it was clear Scott had been drinking. It seemed strange because it was only around midday, yet there he was, inebriated. I decided to file charges against him because he had really ticked me off and I wanted him out of my life. This also offered me the opportunity to get a restraining order against him, since he was plainly losing control. The authorities took him away, and a few minutes later, my nanny returned with my daughter. I gave her the rest of the day off because I planned to stay at home with my child. I'll probably have to take a few more days off from work, but I'm not complaining because I get to spend more time with my favorite person. Update 3. It's been a few weeks since my previous post. I've been busy caring for my baby and decided to embark on a new project, which has been exciting. Regarding the situation between my parents and Scott, I was able to obtain a restraining order against him. Fortunately, it wasn't too difficult because I had surveillance tape from the day he showed up intoxicated and started throwing a fuss when he learned I wasn't home. I suppose my parents looked at his condition and decided not to bother me anymore, so they've been staying away. My ex-in-laws informed me that, following what happened, they have decided to cut relations with Scott as well. Apparently, he's having trouble locating other ladies, despite his desire to start a family. He can't do it without a partner, and he dislikes the thought of adopting, which may explain why he acted out the other day. But it doesn't mean I have to forgive him, especially given everything he's put me through. My parents are still attempting to badmouth me to my relatives, which is unfortunate because it isn't working. Everyone knows they did the worst thing to me, and now they're pretending they're the victims. That's not how it works, and they're finding out the hard way. I'm delighted they won't have any relationship with their grandchild. I won't allow it. My kid and I will have a lovely life together without anyone troubling us, and I'm determined to be a far better parent than the ones I had as an example. Fiancé banned me from my dad's wedding because of my facial scars. Now she's harassing us and got arrested after we called the cops. I am 16 years old, female, and am attending high school. I've had a horrible run recently with my soon-to-be stepmother. My biological mother died when I was 6 years old. Even though I was very little and my recollections of her are foggy, I recall that my father and I adored her more than anything in the world. She was pretty much my best friend when I was a kid, and I'm grateful that I got to be her daughter for the brief time she was with us. My father was terribly melancholy when my mother died. Even though he tried to disguise it from me, I could tell he was in pain. So I tried my best to cheer him up and be a good daughter. My mother's death drew us closer together, and my father assumed the role of best friend and confidant that my mother had previously occupied. He took on the duties of mother and father with ease, and I am grateful to have had him as a parent. He has never let me down. He was always there for me as I grew up, and even when he was busy at work, I never felt like I couldn't ask him for guidance or simply talk. He always made it clear to me that he was accessible for me, no matter how busy he appeared to be, and this stuck with me. My father began dating Emily 3 years ago, and I was overjoyed for him. I thought he deserved all the happiness in the world, and I was relieved he was finally getting on with his life. I wasn't insecure, as some kids would have been in my situation. I truly supported his relationship with Emily because I wanted him to be able to enjoy his life to the best. He had done an excellent job being there for me after my mother died, and now I wanted him to be there for himself. Most of my family was surprised to learn that, at the age of 13, I had such adult thoughts, and they liked it. But for some reason, Emily seemed to be the only person who disliked me. Even though I had no issues with her, Emily's attitude toward me altered the first time we met. She had been nice to me while my father was in the room, but as soon as he left, I felt something change. I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back, I can see that her demeanor toward me turned uncaring when my father was not present. When he returned, she was friendly again. I thought that was strange, but at 13, I assumed I was just overthinking things. This pattern persisted for several years. I never spoke up because I didn't consider it a big problem. When my father was not present, all she did was act apathetic, which was not necessarily terrible but also not good. My father appeared happy, so I didn't say anything. After a year of dating my father, she moved in with us and things changed dramatically. She moved in with us after a year of dating my father, and it felt strange living with her. She worked from home, and as soon as I returned from school, things became unpleasant and tense. Despite the fact that we shared a home, it felt as if she was purposefully ignoring me, pretending I wasn't there. She limited her interactions with me to a minimum, but as soon as my father arrived from work, she transformed into a completely different person, behaving like my best friend. I thought it was unusual, but because it had no detrimental effect on my life, I just went along with it and never brought it up again. We had an unwritten agreement not to bring it up for the sake of my father's happiness. I quickly understood that she and I were not close and would never be, which I was perfectly happy with. That's how we spent the previous few years living together. And my father had no idea we didn't really have a relationship. He thought we were close because of how she described our connection while he was present. They got engaged a few months ago and planned to marry last week. However, the wedding did not take place, and I feel somewhat sorry about this. Emily approached me around 30 minutes before the wedding and informed me that she did not want me to attend. She claimed I appeared too distracting, and would detract from the beauty of the event. Emily said that she had hired experienced photographers and didn't want me to damage the images, thinking I would understand. I was meant to be a bridesmaid, but she simply appointed me to please my father. I knew she didn't want me to be a member of the bridal party, but I consented since it would please my father. I also knew why she didn't want me to attend the ceremony. A dog had attacked my face a few months before. It was a tragic situation, but I was responsible for it. I have a habit of caressing dogs, so when I noticed a woman walking her German Shepherd, I crouched to pet him. I must have startled him, because he attacked me. My nose and cheeks received the brunt of it because they were at the same level as his mouth. I had to be hurried to the hospital, and while it was traumatic, I am well today. My face still has a few surgical scars, but they are mending. I'm not sure if they'll ever go away completely, but they're fading gradually. I had a difficult time accepting the notion that these scars would remain on my face for a long time. I was quite insecure, but my father convinced me that I looked great, and the scars were a sign of strength. His encouragement helped me accept my new appearance. Most people have been supportive and attempted to make me feel better. but Emily was not among them. While I knew she was superficial, I didn't anticipate her to intentionally make me feel horrible about myself. I was really hurt when she informed me that she did not want me at the ceremony. I questioned her right immediately if this was related to the scars on my face. She didn't even hesitate to tell me that she thought my face was distracting and hideous. She didn't want that in her wedding photos 10 years from now since it was unattractive and would mar the photos. As a result, she asked me to move out and requested I not tell my father about it since he would be angry at her, which was the last thing she needed on her wedding day. She explained that she was already anxious from organizing everything and ensuring that everything went smoothly and correctly. She honestly expected me to leave and not attend my own father's wedding because she thought I wasn't attractive enough. She was so entitled and inconsiderate that I resolved to finally tell my father everything that day. I didn't care if it was his wedding day. It was evident to me at that point that Emily was not the type of person who belonged with my father. However, I did not want to confront her directly, so I told her I understood and vowed to remain away from the ceremony. I also assured her that I would find an explanation to explain my absence to my father without getting her in trouble. She was naive enough to fall for it and even thanked me, saying I was doing her a tremendous service and that she hadn't expected me to be so understanding about everything. She claimed I was really mature for my age. I simply laughed it off and exited the room. We were all staying in a hotel because the wedding was taking place on the hotel grounds. After leaving her room, I returned on my own and quickly contacted my father. He was already downstairs, where the wedding was scheduled to take place, and I did not want to waste time looking for him. Even though the wedding was only half an hour away, I knew I was the only person whose call he would answer. As expected, he responded on the first ring. I instantly began my story, telling him everything without halting. I recounted how Emily had treated me over the last few years, how she pretended to be in a relationship with me solely to keep him happy, and how she clearly didn't care about me or being a member of a family. I told him that even if he went forward with the wedding, I needed to give him the truth before he made a decision. He did not say much during the call. All he said was that he was glad I told him the truth, even if it was only minutes before the wedding. He said he understood what he had to do and hung up, telling me to wait in my room until he told me to come out. For the following several hours, I had no idea what was going on. People were contacting me to ask what was going on and why the wedding was delayed, but they stopped after about an hour. Everything became silent. I tried calling my father, but it went to voicemail. I also called some of his pals, who indicated they had no idea what was going on either. Apparently, after my phone conversation, my father went up to Emily's room to speak with her and did not return. The only thing he told his buddies was that the wedding was no longer happening, and that was the message they spread to everyone, so people stopped inquiring about it. I was quite scared because I thought my father would be upset with me for ruining his wedding. I cried in my room for over 4 hours before he arrived to collect me. When I asked him what was going on, he said I didn't need to worry because we were going home. Naturally, I inquired about Emily, and he informed me that she would not be accompanying us and that their relationship had ended. He said it without emotion, so I'm not sure if he was upset about it at the time. Even now I have no idea because he refuses to discuss it. I'm guessing he's upset, but he's not ready to talk about it with me. I'm guessing he's plainly upset but refuses to discuss it so I don't feel guilty. However, it is not working because I'm not feeling well, as Emily has confirmed. She's been speaking negatively about me and I can't believe a woman her age could say such things about a 16-year-old who was only trying to protect her father. Emily has made multiple Facebook postings, but she does not mention me by name, so I can't really point them out and claim they're about me. But I know they are, since she paints me as a crafty and evil person. It's incredibly upsetting because I don't believe I'm like that at all. She claims that I purposefully chose the last few minutes before the wedding to speak with my father in order to embarrass and disrespect her in front of the guests, alleging that this was always my intention. This could not be further from the truth. The only reason I spoke with my father was because she stated that she did not want me at the wedding because of my scars. She's also claimed that I was the one who faked our relationship and never made an honest effort to connect with her on a human level. There may be some truth to that. When I saw she wasn't the same person around my father as she was with me, I gave up trying to understand or get along with her. I simply ignored her in return. But I assumed that was because she showed no desire in developing a connection with me. I can tell she's unhappy, and I feel responsible for ruining the entire wedding. Even though I know I have no reason to feel bad, I am unsure about what I did. A part of me believes I owe both Emily and my father an apology. Maybe I should have spoken up sooner. Keeping everything to myself until the wedding made everything worse, but I'm also worried I'm behaving out of emotion. I wanted to be sure I wasn't in the wrong before doing anything. Am I the asshole? AITA. for informing my father about my stepmother's behavior half an hour before the wedding, leading it to be cancelled because she made a comment about my scars and stated that she did not want me at the ceremony for the purpose of flawless pictures. Update 1. Thank you so much for your comments on my initial post. I appreciate what everyone has said. You are all so kind. I have determined that I will not apologize. After what has transpired, I genuinely do not believe I should, and I certainly do not owe anything to Emily. Everything she accuses me of is precisely who she is in reality. My father has blocked her everywhere, so she can no longer reach him. However, she can still text me, which she did. She contacted me a few days ago and went off on me about what had happened prior to the wedding. It has been over 15 days since the wedding, and this occurred around 4 days ago. It began with a routine text in which she requested if we could speak. I figured, why not, while I was still feeling responsible and bad for spoiling the wedding. That proved to be a terrible error. As soon as I informed her she could call, she called me, and when I answered, she and several of her friends began yelling at me, calling me the most awful insults they could think of. This lasted for almost a minute and a half. I was so shocked that I couldn't grasp what was going on. This was a woman in her 30s, and I understand why she didn't like me, but this was literal bullying, and I wasn't expecting it after all her posts. I suppose I should have known better and avoided interacting with her at all, but my guilt clouded my judgment. Anyway, once I came to my senses, I hung up the phone and went straight to my father. I informed him about the Facebook posts and phone call. I also apologized for keeping it from him, explaining that I didn't want to make him any more angry than he was already. Attempting to keep things from getting worse simply made matters worse. We had a serious discussion about my behavior, and he informed me that I could come to him with whatever difficulty I was having, whenever I needed his assistance, because that's what he was here for. He emphasized that he is here to protect me and that he, not I, is the parent, therefore I do not need to worry about protecting him from anything. He also informed me that I am the most important person in his life, and nothing will ever change that, so I didn't have to worry about trivial matters like him being unhappy about something so significant. He stated he was glad I came clean just in time so he didn't marry Emily, because things may have turned out a lot worse. That encounter taught me that I should quit second-guessing myself and, at the very least, be honest with my father. If anything, he is the one guy who can always get me out of trouble, and I need to be honest with him for both of our sakes. Following our chat, he decided to phone Emily and express his displeasure with how she had handled me. He wasn't aware of the post because he and his buddies had blocked her, so they had no idea what she was up to. I was the only one who remained on her friend list, most likely because she wanted me to hear all she was saying, knowing how it would affect me. I had blindly fallen for it all, without considering the repercussions. I was disappointed in myself for being so naive, but my father saw it positively. He assured me I wasn't an idiot, but 16, and that's what I'm going to use to justify all of my poor actions around this time, heh. Anyway, he called Emily, and this time, it was my father who put her on blast. He texted her to see if she was available to chat, and when she answered yes, he called her and confronted her for bullying me with her friends. He warned her that if she harassed me again, she would suffer severe penalties and threatened to report her to the cops. Then he hung up without giving her an opportunity to explain, because she couldn't truly defend her conduct. Update 2. This post comes barely a day after my last one since Emily came to our house this morning to speak with my father, and it did not go well. I'm not sure why, but she still believes she can repair her relationship with my father and reconcile with him, despite what she did to me. Obviously, my father did not open the door when she arrived. He advised her to leave because he had nothing to say and did not want to hear from her. But she refused to leave until she had a chance to speak with him. When I told her she wasn't welcome anymore, she yelled at me, telling me I had nothing to do with anything and should stay out of it. She claimed I was pushing my nose where it did not belong. This time I was not going to back down. This was my house, and she was in my territory now. I yelled back, warning her that if she tried to ruin our weekend, we'd call the cops and have her taken off the property. Unfortunately for her, she did not take me seriously and continued to argue with me, as if this would get her anywhere with my father. She's so unreasonable that she came to reconcile with my father but ended up creating a fight with me, something she knew my father would not enjoy. It was evident that defeating me was more important to her than reuniting with my father, which was heartbreaking. My father actually cared for her, and here she was making a spectacle of herself by arguing with his teenage daughter for no apparent reason other than her irrational hatred of me. After battling with her for a long time, I knew I couldn't continue. She was too illogical and unreasonable to talk to, and it was so frustrating that I couldn't even argue with her properly. She kept blaming me for everything, despite the fact that she was the one who canceled the wedding. I was growing annoyed and didn't want to quarrel anymore, so my father and I simply stopped replying to her. We called the police to have her taken away since we didn't want to waste any more of our morning on her. She continued screaming after that, but it made no difference to us because we had finished talking to her. When the cops eventually arrived, they arrested her and took her away. I don't think it'll be more than a slap on the wrist for her, but at least she learned her lesson, which I hope will stick. She was truly startled that we had contacted the police, since she had not expected it. It was clear on her face when we walked out of the house as she was being arrested. At some point, she realized we no longer cared about her and began yelling at me even louder than before, which was a daring move given the cops were close there. She was practically demonstrating herself to be insane. She completely lost control and began yelling at me, which shocked even the officers. That's one of the reasons my father filed charges against her, even if it wasn't our original intention. But with her cursing at me, it couldn't be ignored. Her behavior was insane and sad, and I'm relieved she's gone. I sincerely hope she doesn't return because we don't need this in our lives. My father and I have dealt with enough drama to last a lifetime in the last 2 weeks, and we are finally done. Update 3. Hey everyone, it's been about 3 months since the wedding was cancelled. My father and I agreed to take a trip to clear our minds. I'm on summer break right now, and we went hiking, something my mother used to enjoy. I enjoy being in nature as well, so this is ideal for both of us. We've had a terrific time, and I'm grateful that my father and I are actively working to improve our connection. This ensures that past misconceptions do not occur again. At the end of the day, we are all we have, and he is the only family I can rely on. I need to be honest with him and tell him vital things instead of worrying that something will upset him or trying to protect him from things he doesn't need to be protected from. We haven't heard from Emily in a long time, and I truly hope that continues. I know hate is a strong term, but I don't think it describes how I feel about her. According to what I know, after being jailed, she was released but continued to speak negatively about me and my father. I honestly don't care anymore because that's the type of person she is, and we're relieved to be rid of her. It does not matter. My sister-in-law faked car accident injuries to manipulate my husband, but I caught her on camera. Now she's in jail for fraud. I never expected to be spilling my heart out on Reddit, yet here I am, desperate for advice and support. I'm Nancy, 28F, and I'm currently dealing with my husband's family, notably his sister Jenny, 32F. Jenny and I have always had a rocky relationship, but recent events have pushed things to breaking point. To provide some context, I met my husband Warren, 30M, at a mutual friend's Halloween party 5 years ago. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was dressed as Wonder Woman, and he arrived as Clark Kent. We spent the entire night conversing in a secluded nook, ignoring the craziness of the party around us. We hit it off right away, bonding over our mutual love of hiking, photography and 1980s movies. I had never felt such an instant connection with anyone before. We chose to marry after 2 years of dating, which included weekend escapades, nice movie nights, and the occasional disagreement, typically about Warren's habit of leaving his socks everywhere. Our wedding was a small, personal celebration in a rustic barn, attended by close friends and family. That was when I first met Jenny. Jenny made it apparent from the moment we met that she did not like me. She arrived late for the rehearsal dinner in a white outfit that looked strangely bridal. During her toast, she spent more time reminiscing about her childhood memories with Warren than wishing us success in our marriage. She even accidentally poured red wine over my outfit during the reception. At the time, I put it down to wedding day stress and attempted to dismiss it. Jenny's behavior intensified over the months. She would make disparaging remarks about my work as a freelance graphic designer, hinting that I was not talented enough for her brother. "Oh, you're still doing that little drawing thing?" she'd ask with a condescending smile. "I thought you'd have found a real job by now." Each comment seemed like a small knife, eroding away at my self-esteem. Warren is from a close-knit family, and he has always been protective of Jenny. Jenny's parents died in a vehicle accident when she was 18, leaving her to raise Warren alone. She put her goal of becoming a nurse on hold in order to support her family with 2 jobs. I understand and admire their bond, but Jenny uses it to control Warren and disrupt our relationship. The first serious incident happened on our first wedding anniversary. Warren and I had planned a weekend retreat to a quiet mountain chalet, where we had spent our first trip together. I had been looking forward to it for months, planned hikes, picnics, and even a surprise candlelight dinner beneath the stars. Jenny called Warren in tears 2 days before we were about to depart, saying she was going through a difficult breakup and needed her brother's support. Warren, being the compassionate guy he is, proposed that we postpone our trip to be present for Jenny. I was disappointed, but I understood the circumstances. After all, Family comes first, right? However, when we got to Jenny's house, we discovered her laughing and drinking wine with her friends. There were no signs of a split or sorrow. When I asked her about it later, she dismissed it, claiming she was simply feeling low and needed some companionship. "You wouldn't understand, Nancy," she murmured patronizingly, patting my arm. "Warren and I share a special bond. Sometimes I just want my lil' brother around." Warren saw nothing wrong with it, but I couldn't resist the suspicion that Jenny had purposefully thwarted our intentions. Jenny's intrusion into our life increased in frequency and severity over time. She would pop up unexpectedly to our place, usually on date nights or when Warren and I had scheduled some quality time together. She once interrupted a romantic supper that I had spent hours preparing. "Oh, did I interrupt something?" she inquired innocently, before settling into our couch and putting on the television. She would phone Warren at weird hours, claiming to have various emergencies that always seemed to be resolved by the time we arrived. One night, at 2 a.m., she called to report a gas leak in her apartment. We rushed over, only to find her quietly watching a movie, saying the scent had vanished just before we arrived. The problem came to a climax last month at Warren's 30th birthday celebration. I had spent weeks preparing a surprise party for all of Warren's friends and colleagues. I even managed to fly in his best friend from college, Mike, whom he hadn't seen in years due to their locations on separate coasts. The celebration was in full swing, with everyone enjoying the catered cuisine, open bar, and the presentation of Warren's life that I had painstakingly created. Jenny arrived an hour late, crashing into the living room while evidently intoxicated. She was holding a large gift box covered in glittering gold paper, and she proudly stated that she had the nicest present for her newborn brother. The room went silent as she demanded everyone's attention. The box contained a set of keys. Jenny proudly announced that she had purchased Warren a classic car he had long desired, a 1967 Chevrolet Impala, the very kind his father used to drive. I felt my heart fall. My own gift, a homemade picture album recording our relationship and a weekend vacation to his favorite camping spot, fell short in contrast. The room fell silent as all eyes went to Warren. I could see the conflict on his face. He was definitely moved by the gesture, but he was also concerned by the gift's extravagant nature. "Jen," he continued quietly, "this is too much. How did you afford this?" But what occurred next really stunned me. Jenny looked at me triumphantly and said, "See, this is how you show love, not with some cheap crafts and a trip to the woods." Her words struck deep, and I felt embarrassed in front of all of our guests. The room became uncomfortably quiet, and our friends shifted nervously, unsure where to look. Warren eventually spoke up, his voice strained with rage. "Jenny, that is enough. Your actions are improper and you should go." Jenny's face was distorted with wrath. She threw the keys at Warren's chest before stumbling towards me, pointing an accusatory finger. "You," she muttered, "have turned him against me. You are ruining our family." She stormed out, knocking over a vase of flowers and slammed the door so hard that a picture fell from the wall. The gathering soon dispersed after that, with guests making embarrassing excuses to go early. I was left standing in our living room, surrounded by half-finished food and deflated balloons, feeling completely dejected. Warren and I had a long, emotional chat late into the night after everyone else had left. He apologized for not standing up to Jenny sooner and pledged to establish clearer limits with her. We agreed that Jenny's behavior was harmful and that we needed to minimize our interactions with her for the sake of our marriage. But as I looked into Warren's eyes, I could sense the sorrow and turmoil. How could I ask him to choose between his wife and his sister, who had given so much for him? The next day, Warren called Jenny to discuss what had transpired. He informed her that her acts were inappropriate and that she needed to apologize to me if she wanted to remain a part of our life. Jenny refused, claiming she had done nothing wrong and that I was causing difficulties in their family. "I'm the only real family you have left, Warren," she added, her voice full with sorrow. "Don't let her take that away from you. We've reached an impasse. Warren is caught between his feelings for me and his commitment to his sister. I don't want to force him to make a decision, but I can't keep living with the continual stress and drama. I'm thinking about suggesting that we move to a different city to get some distance, but I'm concerned about Warren's reaction. Will he consider it an ultimatum? Will this merely bring him closer to Jenny? I adore my husband and want to make our marriage work, but I'm beginning to worry if it's feasible with Jenny's frequent intervention. Am I overreacting? Should I work harder to reconcile with Jenny for Warren's sake, or should I take more drastic measures to protect our relationship? Any advice is much appreciated. I feel like I'm drowning in a sea of family drama, and I'm not sure how to get back to shore. Update. It has been almost a month since my original post, and I wanted to provide an update on Jenny's situation. A lot has happened. and I'm still trying to digest it all. Thank you to everyone who gave me advice and support. It helped me get through this difficult period. Following my previous essay, Warren and I discussed Jenny's behavior and its influence on our marriage numerous times more. We decided to take a break from Jenny for a while to focus on our relationship. Warren committed to minimize his contact with her and to always communicate with me before making any plans that involved his sister. It was not an easy decision for him, and I could feel the guilt weighing on him, but he saw that it was vital for our marriage. For the first few weeks, everything was peaceful. Jenny seemed to respect our boundaries, and Warren and I were spending some much-needed quality time together. We resumed regular date evenings, which we hadn't done in months due to Jenny's frequent interruptions. We even began organizing a vacation for just the two of us, a hiking trip through multiple national parks, which we had discussed since we first started dating but had never found the time for. For the first time in a long time, I felt optimistic about the future. However, roughly 3 weeks after Warren's birthday party, events took an unexpected turn. It was a quiet Sunday evening, and Warren and I were watching a movie on the couch when his phone called. Mrs. Johnson, Jenny's neighbor, was identified on the caller ID. Warren replied, his brow pinched with anxiety. Warren's face lost color as I watched, and he jumped up abruptly, nearly knocking over his glass of wine. "We'll be right there," he stated, his voice cracking. He turned to me, his eyes wide with horror. "Jenny has been in a vehicle accident. She is at St. Mary's Hospital." The drive to the hospital was tense. Warren held the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white while I attempted to obtain additional information from Mrs. Johnson over the phone. Jenny was driving home from a bar when she lost control of her vehicle and smashed into a tree. The police suspected she was driving under the influence. We arrived at the hospital and found Jenny in the emergency department. She was conscious but definitely in pain, with her right arm in a temporary cast and tiny wounds on her face from the smashed windshield. When she spotted Warren, she burst into tears and reached for him with her good arm. "I'm so sorry," she wailed as Warren gently embraced her. I botched up so badly." I stood awkwardly to the side, divided between sorrow for Jenny's situation and annoyance that yet another crisis had interrupted our lives. The doctor informed us that Jenny had been fortunate. Aside from a fractured arm and some cuts and bruises, she had no serious injuries. However, she would require someone to care for her for a few weeks while her arm healed. Warren offered to take care of her before I could even think about what that meant. "She can stay with us," he added, looking at me pleadingly. "Just till she gets back on her feet. We cannot leave her alone like this." I wanted to object and remind him of our commitment to keep boundaries, but how could I say no in this situation? I reluctantly nodded in agreement. Jenny moved in with us the next day, and it's been a nightmare ever since. She continuously demands Warren's attention, phoning him for everything. "Warren, can you help me with my pillows? Warren, I need a glass of water. Warren, can you change the channel for me?" It's as if she's returned to a defenseless child, and Warren is only too willing to play the role of protecting Big Brother. She complains about everything. "Nancy, the stuff you cook is too spicy. Don't you realize I have a delicate stomach? The way you've set up the guest room, the sun comes in too bright in the morning. Can't you get some better curtains?" And just about anything else she can think of. I try to be patient, reminding myself that she is injured and likely in pain, but it is wearing me down. The worst part is that I am beginning to suspect Jenny isn't as helpless as she claims to be. I've noticed her using her damaged arm normally when she thinks no one is looking, like reaching for the TV remote or adjusting her hair. But the moment Warren enters the room, she returns to wincing and gripping her arm as if it were made of glass. When I conveyed this to Warren, he accused me of being neurotic and uncaring. "She's hurt, Nancy," he replied, his voice tight and frustrated. "Why can't you just be supportive?" I felt crazy. Was I truly being unreasonable, or was Jenny manipulating us both? Things escalated last night when I overheard Jenny on the phone with a buddy. I hadn't intended to eavesdrop, but as I walked past the guest room to do laundry, I heard Jenny's voice, which was especially energetic and enthusiastic. Curiosity got the best of me, so I stopped outside the door to listen. "Girl, you wouldn't believe how well this is working out," Jenny said, laughing. "I have Warren waiting for me hand and foot. He's so concerned about me that it's almost too simple." She paused to listen to her friend's response. "The arm? Oh, it scarcely hurts anymore, but they don't need to know, do they? I believe I can stretch this out for at least another month. Maybe by then I'll be able to convince Warren that he's far better off with his real family." I felt like I had been hit in the stomach. All of my concerns were confirmed in the worst conceivable way. Jenny wasn't simply taking advantage of the circumstance, She was deliberately attempting to build a wedge between Warren and myself. I am at a loss on what to do. I tried to tell Warren what I heard, but he didn't believe me. He thinks I'm just trying to get rid of Jenny, and that my animosity for her is clouding my judgment. Why would she lie about being hurt? He said, his voice filled with mistrust. That doesn't make any sense, Nancy. I feel insane in my own home, watching this lady influence my husband and destroy our marriage. The vacation we had planned seems like a distant memory now. Instead of wandering through gorgeous scenery, I'm stuck in a house with a lady who appears determined to destroy my life. I'm thinking about taking a few days off to clear my mind, possibly staying with my friend Lisa, but I'm concerned about leaving Warren alone with Jenny and her influence. What if I return to discover she has entirely turned him against me? I love my spouse, but I'm beginning to question if our marriage will survive this. How can we move forward if he does not believe me? How do I compete with the bond he has with Jenny? Any advice is much appreciated. I feel like I've reached the end of my rope and have no idea what to do next. Update 2. It's been 2 months since my previous report and Jenny's situation has taken an unexpected turn. I'd like to thank everyone who gave advice and support. It really helped me get through this difficult period. After my last update, I was at my wit's end. I couldn't continue to watch Jenny damage my marriage. Taking several commenters' advice, I decided to collect actual evidence of Jenny's deceit. I know many of you recommended against it, citing privacy concerns, but I felt I had no choice. I installed a covert camera in the living room. I told myself it was only for a few days, just to show to Warren that I wasn't hallucinating. Within 2 days, I had convincing evidence that Jenny used her wounded arm regularly when Warren was not around. I caught her lifting heavy books, fixing her hair, and even opening a tight jar lid with the arm she said was too painful to use. The true shock came when I recorded a chat between Jenny and one of her friends who had come to visit. Jenny blatantly criticized me, calling me gullible and boasting about how simple it was to deceive Warren. He's always been a sucker for the damsel in distress act, she told me. A few crocodile tears and he's putty in my hands. I felt horrible listening to it, but I knew I'd found the proof I needed. With shaking hands, I transferred the tape to a USB drive and waited for Warren to return home from work. When Warren came, I sat down and told him what I'd done. He was outraged at first, accusing me of invading Jenny's privacy, but I begged him to simply view the films. His face turned pale as he saw a film of Jenny using her arm normally and heard her taunting words. "I can't believe this," he said quietly, his voice scratchy. "Why would she do this?" I had no response for him, but I felt a flood of relief wash over me. Warren could now see the truth. Warren confronted Jenny in the evening. The subsequent argument was fierce and difficult to watch. Jenny first denied everything and accused me of doctoring the footage. But when confronted with overwhelming facts, she broke down. Jenny acknowledged, through tears, misrepresenting her injuries and attempting to separate us. She discussed feeling abandoned when Warren married and her dread of losing the only family she had left. Jenny had never shown me this side of herself before, vulnerable, terrified, and extremely insecure. Warren, split between rage and concern for his sister, urged Jenny to leave our home immediately. She begged him to let her stay, pledging to reform, but Warren stood firm. "You need help, Jenny," he continued, his tone stern but not harsh. "Professional assistance, and until you respect our marriage, you are not welcome here." Jenny left that night, amidst tears and recriminations. The house felt strangely quiet after she left. Warren and I sat in silence for a long time, absorbing the day's events. Warren finally turned to me and apologized. "I'm so sorry, Nancy," he replied, his eyes overflowing with regret. "I should have believed you. I should have seen what was happening." We talked late into the night about trust, family, and the future of our marriage. Things remained tense for a few weeks, but they gradually improved. Warren went to therapy to sort out his confusing feelings about his relationship with Jenny. We also began couples counseling to repair the trust that had been broken and enhance our marriage. Then, approximately a month ago, we got unexpected news. Jenny had been arrested for fraud. Apparently, she was running a small-scale Ponzi scheme, defrauding friends and acquaintances of their cash. The classic automobile she had given Warren for his birthday. Warren was heartbroken after purchasing the item with stolen money. He felt bad for not recognizing the warning flags earlier and for maybe enabling Jenny's actions over time. I did my best to encourage him during this difficult period, reminding him that Jenny's actions were entirely her responsibility. We've now discovered that Jenny's deceptive behavior stretched far beyond our relationship. She had a history of abusing people's trust and sympathy for personal benefit. It was a difficult realization, but it helped Warren recognize that her actions were not his fault. This entire event has put our marriage to the test. There are times when trust difficulties return, when one of us retreats into our own thoughts, but we're working through them together. We've learned to communicate more openly and rely on one another for assistance. We're still processing what's happened, but we're doing it together. Warren has resolved to entirely remove himself from Jenny until she seeks proper help and makes sincere atonement. It's been difficult for him, but he knows it's vital for our well-being. We're focusing on healing and progress. We postponed our vacation and are looking forward to spending uninterrupted time together. There is still a long road ahead of us, but for the first time in a long time, I am cautiously hopeful about our prospects. Update 3. It has been 6 months since my last update, and I wanted to share some concluding thoughts on this chapter of our lives. Warren and I have made considerable progress in our relationship. Couples counseling has been really beneficial, teaching us improved communication skills and how to support one another during stressful situations. We had to relearn how to trust one another, which wasn't always easy. There have been disagreements, times of uncertainty, and nights spent sleeping in different rooms. However, we've rediscovered the love and connection that brought us together in the first place. Warren has persisted with his individual treatment, working through his complex emotions toward Jenny and his background. He's had to face some difficult truths about his childhood and the relationship between him and his sister. It has been terrible for him, but I can see him becoming stronger and more self-aware with each passing week. Jenny pleaded guilty to the fraud charges and is now serving a 2-year sentence. Warren debated whether or not to attend her trial, but eventually opted against it. He wrote her a letter explaining his decision and expressing his hope that she will utilize this time to ponder and seek the assistance she requires. We haven't had direct touch with Jenny since she went to prison, but we did get a letter from her about a month ago. She apologized for her behavior and the anguish she had caused us. She added that she has been diagnosed with many mental health concerns and is now receiving appropriate therapy. While the letter appears earnest, Warren and I are wary about getting our hopes up. We've agreed that if Jenny displays persistent long-term change following her release, we'll explore gradually restoring our relationship with her. But for now, we're keeping our distance. On a bright side, Warren and I finally went on the vacation we had planned. We spent 2 weeks hiking and camping in national parks, reconnecting with each other and the mutual interests that drew us together in the beginning. There were tensions, old scars emerging in quiet moments around the campfire, but also moments of joy, of rediscovering one another away from the stresses of our daily lives. We've also taken important decisions about our future. We plan to relocate to a new city next year for a fresh start. Warren has been offered an excellent work opportunity, and I'm delighted about the prospects for my freelance business in a new market. We both believe that a change of environment will allow us to put the turmoil of the past behind us and focus on creating our lives together. Looking back, I realize how this difficult experience has ultimately enhanced our marriage. We've learned to stand together in the face of external demands, to instinctively trust each other, and to prioritize our partnership at all times. Warren has developed tremendously, learning to set appropriate boundaries and spot manipulative conduct, even from close ones. Personally, I've learned to trust my instincts and speak up when something feels wrong. I've also discovered the value of patience and understanding, particularly when dealing with complex family dynamics. Although the trip has been arduous, I am grateful for where it has taken us. Warren and I are closer than ever, and we are cautiously optimistic about what the future holds. We know there will always be obstacles, but we are better prepared to confront them together. Thank you to everyone who has followed our story and provided support along the way. Your guidance and encouragement have been helpful. Here is to fresh beginnings and healthier connections. I suspect my husband may be the father of his best friend's children, and now one of them is showing interest in my daughter. Original post, Septed to 2024, all names are fake. This began as a dark, intrusive thought that I could never shake off, and over the years it has bloomed into a poison flower that infects my entire psyche. I'm a 42-year-old woman. My husband Luke is 43, and so is Amy. I met Luke in college, but he's known Amy since they were about 7. They did everything together and understood each other implicitly. They were best friends. They've always insisted that they are surrogate siblings to each other. Naturally, I, as a new girlfriend, felt a little threatened by Amy and her closeness to Luke, but they both reassured me I had nothing to worry about. That their bond was not romantic and had never been sexual. That Amy really was just the sister that Luke never had. I believed them, and it didn't take long for me to forget any and all insecurity I had about Amy. She became my friend too. She officiated our wedding. Luke and I have built a wonderful life together and we always had a strong relationship. After we got married and moved in together, We still saw a lot of Amy, and I was fine with that. I've spent many a night on the town trying to help Amy find a man, as she has always lamented how she is unlucky in love. Luke and I started to have children after we were married, and at around the same point, so did Amy. For further context, my children are Sophie, 15, Owen, 12, Louise, 10, and Carter, 6. Amy's children are Tom, 17, Kaylee, 14, and twins, Adam and Jenna, 9. Now Amy was not in a relationship at this point. She was not married. As far as I knew, she was dating but not consistently. As Luke and I had more kids and our family grew, periodically Amy would find herself pregnant as well. It happened a few times, and Luke and I never knew anything about the fathers in question. I kind of assumed that maybe Amy was sleeping around and not keeping in contact with her one-night stands. Luke agreed this was probably the answer. While I did ask each time if Amy knew the paternity, she always said no, and she didn't seem that worried about the idea of raising kids on her own, so I didn't pester her. Of course, she had us to support her, so there was that. While Amy never asked for any help, of course Luke was never going to let his best friend struggle to stay afloat when she had children to raise. Financially, we are very fortunate and privileged. I have a job that pays handsomely, and Luke also had wealthy parents who already knew and loved Amy, so they were happy to provide for her. My in-laws defy all stereotypes, they are the kindest and gentlest people. So we were able to support Amy. To get her somewhere to stay with her kids. People might be tempted to call her a leech, but I never saw it that way. None of us did. She needed help and we could provide it. I also know people are going to criticize her for her lack of responsibility and question why she never used more reliable birth control. Honestly? That is a long story that I don't want to get into because even I don't fully understand her reasoning, but it was quite important to her that she never be on birth control and that whatever came of that choice, she would accept. It wasn't religiously motivated, I know that, but it was that degree of significance to Amy. She really did not want to take birth control. She's explained it to me more than once, but I'm still not clear on why. Of course, Amy being Luke's best friend since they were kids, it's not unreasonable that sometimes they hang out together while I'm not there. Hey, that's fine. Sometimes I hang out with Amy one-on-one as well, though Luke does it more. She was his friend first. This included him going over to where she was staying and at times, sleeping over there. Was I a fool to trust him and believe nothing was going on? Perhaps. But for years, they presented as being buddies. Like siblings. I didn't pick up on any vibes between them, not ever. As one can expect, our children were brought up together. Not in the same house, our home is decently sized but even we don't have the room for 8 kids. But we made sure Amy's children met ours from a young age, and they always got along and strong bonds of friendship have formed over the years, which is good. Especially if I'm right, and they share blood. I've been dawdling getting to the main point. Yes. I have come to suspect that Luke fathered at least one of Amy's kids, if not all of them. Frankly, I do suspect they are all his. I would never have believed my husband to be capable of such a thing, and he's given me no indication that he is the unfaithful sort. But he does spend a lot of time with Amy, and I have to confess I cannot remember seeing her with any real boyfriend over the years. She would talk to men at bars and parties, I would try to be her wingman, and so on. But nothing ever seemed to really happen. So when she got pregnant the first time, I was curious. When it happened again, and again, I began to wonder if she had some sort of secret fella who she didn't want us to know about for whatever reason. But I couldn't think of any reason why she would hide him, especially from her children. After Carter, our youngest, was born, Luke and I agreed that the time had come for him to have a vasectomy. Amy's twins had come just a couple of years prior. Of course, after the procedure, Luke and I continued to make love, but I no longer had to think about pregnancy. Meanwhile, Amy never got pregnant again, after the twins. Is it a coincidence that Luke had a vasectomy and then both of us stopped getting pregnant? I don't know. But Luke would still visit her, and he wasn't just going to see her, but checking up on her children as well. In general, I should have paid more attention to it sooner, but Luke has always acted like a father to them, especially as they've gotten older. He's the father they never had. He doesn't neglect me, or our children, not one bit. He's doing double duty. On its own, the idea that he is a surrogate father to Amy's fatherless children isn't inherently suspicious. One could call it noble, but it combines with a lot of other little things. There's appearance as well. I won't go into specifics of hair color, eye color, or unique physical traits, because I'd rather limit the identifying factors of the people involved and keep this whole thing as vague as possible. But suffice it to say, Amy's children? They certainly look like they could be Luke's. Kaylee has a very unusual allergy that Luke also has. The twins look very much like him, Adam in particular. The older Tom has gotten, the more of Luke I can see in his face and personality. While their race doesn't matter, the reality is that Luke is a different race than Amy, and Amy's children look pretty biracial. I could easily believe their father is the same race as Luke. Doesn't mean Luke has to be the father, but it sure seems like it. I have never voiced my anxieties to either Amy or Luke. I don't want to be the bad guy and, guilty or innocent, I already know they would flatly deny my accusations and be hurt by them. Imagine if that drama reached the ears of my kids, or Amy's kids. Either way, Luke continues to spend time with Amy and her children, just as her children spend time with mine. I have hinted to Luke that I feel needy for more attention and wish he wouldn't give as much to Amy. But he either missed my cues or pretended that he missed them. I don't want to push this idea that he's favoring her, because it's not even really true. He's never neglected me for her. I can't shake the feeling that Luke and Amy have been intimate before, likely numerous times. So far as I know, Amy never really wanted to be a mother either. She wasn't opposed to it, and when each of her children came into the world she instantly fell in love with them, but motherhood was never really a major part of her life plan or identity. In the grand scheme of things, when we would talk about the future, she would sometimes mention a husband and children, but it never seemed like something she had her heart particularly set on. So I don't think this is a case of Luke just giving Amy children. I doubt that was the motive for the infidelity. That would have been a side effect. I've been letting this go and turning a blind eye for years. It was a dark thought in the back of my mind after Kaylee's allergy was discovered, but I dismissed it. Got worse after the twins were born. I dismissed it. Then when Amy stopped having babies, I wanted to feel reassured by that. But Luke had gotten a vasectomy, so if anything, that made my anxiety worse. There have been nights that I wished the twins were younger, that they had come along after Luke's procedure. It's been twisting me into knots for a long time, but I don't want to be the one who rips our family apart, especially since, technically, I could be wrong. Except now I'm very afraid, because in the last few months we've had a new development in our kids' social circle. Tom, Amy's eldest, asked Sophie out. Sophie, my eldest. She's really blossomed over these last few years and become quite the outspoken beauty, so I'm not shocked to see she's getting male attention, but Tom asking her out had me thrown. Sophie said no, but only because I'm quite protective when it comes to her exploring dating, and she knew she'd have to ask me first. I could tell she was flattered and intrigued by his interest and wanted to say yes. She approached me to talk to me about it. Bless my girl, she did everything right. I think she expected I would see things her way and agree that she could date Tom. Much to her surprise, I very firmly said no. That caused a bit of conflict. She didn't even want to date him that badly, she just couldn't understand why she wasn't allowed to. And I couldn't explain it to her. All I could come up with was, he's too old for you. Which he is, but it's not really about that. When Amy and Luke heard, I was so very curious to see what their reactions would be. If either of them had agreed with Sophie and tried to convince me that the two of them should be allowed to date, I think I would have been relieved and taken that as proof that I was wrong about something going on between them. Wrong about who fathered Amy's children. But the ambiguity continued. They took my side. Both of them put their foot down, though not as fiercely as I did. Luke agreed with me, but he also worried that trying to forbid such a romance would only make Sophie want it more. He's probably right about that. Amy seemed more apathetic to the idea. She didn't want Tom to date Sophie either, and she backed me up, but I don't know, she just wasn't taking it as seriously. She seemed to think it was a fleeting crush. Well, it wasn't. In the months following those conversations, Tom would spend more and more time with Sophie. They would be alone, or with other friends, anytime they possibly could. It's become abundantly clear that Tom is crazy about Sophie and wants to be with her. And he definitely wants to be physical. I've been watching them like a hawk and noticed his eye wandering many times. And while I'm doing everything I can to kill this budding romance in the crib, I also am feeling somewhat powerless. Sophie hasn't outwardly defied me, she's still just hanging out with Tom, as friends. So forcing them to stop spending time together would be unreasonable, and probably encourage more sneaking around. But I'm so afraid that they're already doing that. My nightmare is that they're secretly dating, and doing God knows what when no one is looking. I've observed Tom being rather handsy with Sophie, and she presents no objection whatsoever. And I just don't know what to say. I had considered trying to convince Sophie that Tom is like her brother, but if she doesn't see him that way, I don't really have the power to rewrite their emotional dynamic or the history of their friendship. I always saw Amy and her children as being like family, but my kids might see Amy's kids more as best friends. The problem is, of course, That if my husband has indeed been carrying on an affair over the years and I'm right about the paternity of Amy's children, then Tom and Sophie cannot be anything more than friends under any circumstances. End of discussion. It can never happen. I feel powerless to stop it though. Luke has apparently talked to Tom about this, as has Amy, but he is unrelenting and he won't give up on Sophie. I think she enjoys that attention and devotion. Tom has also confronted me and asked why I'm so against this when I know him very well and I know he would be good to Sophie. I didn't know what to say other than to fall back on her being too young for him, but that won't work forever. If God forbid, they're still attracted to each other in a few years, then they'll pursue this with abandon, and once they're legal adults, there's nothing I can do about it. Amy and Luke agree with me that Tom cannot date Sophie, but that's all they've really done. They feel just as powerless as me to prevent teen love. It genuinely feels sometimes like they've just given up and will bury their heads in the sand about this. Just do nothing and hope the feelings pass as Tom and Sophie get older. Which, yeah, they're in high school. It's unlikely Tom will be in love with Sophie forever. But my fear is that she'll let him do something intimate with her before that time comes, something neither of them can take back. I am this close to opening a door I cannot close, this close to screaming at Luke that all this wouldn't be happening if he hadn't cheated on me these many years. If he hadn't been all but raising a second family with his surrogate sister behind my back. Now Luke's son wants to fuck our daughter, his actual sister, because as far as he knows, she's just his childhood friend. And it's all Luke and Amy's fault for what they've done. If I speak up, everything gets blown to hell. On the off chance that I'm wrong, I'm a horrible monster who accused the love of my life and one of my closest friends of doing something horrible. If I'm right, it still tears our entire structure apart. The family and social unit we've become over the last several years is gone, and everyone will be stressed and upset even if Luke and I don't divorce. If I do nothing, Sophie's eventually going to sleep with Tom and be his girlfriend. And I'm low-key terrified it will happen sooner than later, or worse, that it's already happened under my nose. I hope to hell this relationship fades as they mature, but what if it doesn't? What if they wind up being together for years? What if they marry, want to get pregnant someday? And if I tell Sophie the truth about Amy's kids, then everyone else finds out too, and that's going to ruin so many lives. It would shatter my kids' perception of their father, and their Aunt Amy. Luke is Owen's hero. I don't even want to think about how much this would hurt him. And what about Amy's children? They are innocent. They didn't ask for this, they don't control where they came from, and I don't want to hurt them. Admittedly, I'm not happy with Tom at the moment. A week ago I saw him put his hand on Sophie's butt and I wanted to knock his teeth out. But even he doesn't deserve to be burdened by the knowledge that it's his half-sister he's been fantasizing about. It's all so fucked up and I don't know what to do. I've been looking the other way and letting my husband and his best friend insult me for such a long time now. I thought I could live with it. But this business with Tom and Sophie has me distressed. About a year ago, I suggested we do one of those. Just to see Luke's reaction. He was very staunchly against it, didn't want the government to have our DNA. Kept saying ancestry tests were a scam anyway. I brought it up to Amy, and guess which one of us she agreed with? On if Luke knows she knows about him and Amy. The thing is, I think he's aware that I know. Assuming it's true, and I'm not imagining things, it's kind of been an unspoken reality for a while now. Update 1, Reddit won't let me post a link, so you'll have to find the original post on my account page. Sorry for the inconvenience. I could summarize the original, but these posts are already quite long as it is, and frankly, the TLDR is in the title anyway. So here goes. First of all, wow. I did not expect my post to get as much traction as it did. I was half worried that someone in my family or social circle might find it, especially when someone alerted me that the post had been shared to Facebook. But, as far as I can tell, no one in my family has seen it. I want to thank all of the kind commenters who wished me well. To those who were more frustrated with my indecision, I get it. But I was operating with an uncertain situation and the stakes were incredibly high. I feel like no matter what choice I made, something could and likely would go wrong. I've spent the last 5 years imagining different scenarios based on different ways I could go about this if I ever decided to act on it. To everyone who was clamoring for an update, I have one for you. I previously said that I was going to do a secret DNA test, that I had decided on that course of action. In the end, I couldn't go through with it, and now I am regretting that. Because the window to do so has essentially closed. I just felt like it would be out of line for me to do that to another person's child behind their back. Ethically, it was dicey. I've since consulted with my lawyer as many commenters suggested, and she advised me against doing so, because no matter what the results were, it would make me look bad in a potential divorce proceeding. But I really wish I had done it anyway, and just not told anyone. Because I really, badly need to know, and I still don't know for sure. Likewise, I wanted to tell Sophie in confidence, but the more I thought about it, even that seemed over the line. Like I had no right to plant such ideas in her mind about her father without even talking to him first. So what I ended up doing was confronting Luke and Amy. Many comments suggested this as well. I finally told both of them that we needed to have a serious talk. It felt counterproductive to approach just one of them, because I figured they would tell the other about what happened in their own words before I could prepare my own. I wanted them both to hear what I had to say. Once all the kids were at school, I laid down all of my suspicions and the reasons. I made it clear how much I love both of them, but a combination of clues had led me to notice the similarities between Luke and Amy's children. And I didn't even list all of them in the original post. For example, Luke has been a sleepwalker in the past. So have Sophie, Tom and Adam. I said over and over how much they meant to me and how I didn't want to believe it, but the thought had crept into my mind in the past. How I had dismissed it before, but now, with Tom and Sophie having crushes on each other, it became necessary to pose the question. So I asked if they had ever crossed the line. If Luke had ever been unfaithful. If there was even the slightest possibility that any of Amy's children were his. I was just trying not to cry. Well, they reacted exactly as I would have expected. Their responses were perfect and so very well rehearsed. I genuinely can't tell if it was honest emotion or powerful gaslighting. Amy was more upset than Luke, or at least more outwardly upset. She was angry, offended at the accusation. Luke just seemed heartbroken by it. Maybe they were just acting, but I don't know. Somehow they had reasonable responses to all of the points I brought up. They asked questions I didn't know how to answer. I had never objected to them having alone time before. Why did it suddenly bother me now? Do Amy's children really resemble Luke that much, or are things like hair color pretty basic traits to have in common? The whole family had always treated Amy and her kids as part of our unit, and I had previously commended Luke for stepping up and being a father to Amy's kids since they didn't have one. Why was I now saying it was a bad thing? What exactly did I want them to do? How could I think such a thing about them? Why had I waited so long to say something? Luke was more understanding than Amy. He respected my feelings, or at least he acted like he did. Amy appeared to feel more betrayed by what I said. I ended up apologizing several times even though I'm not sure I did anything wrong. Luke also apologized for anything he'd done to indicate he was unfaithful. I asked Amy more pointedly that, if not Luke, who had fathered her children? She snapped back that it was none of my business, and I could tell she was in no mood to get personal or vulnerable with me after my accusations. I'm not proud to say that I lost my temper, and said that after everything we had done for her and her children, such information was not a lot to ask and perhaps she owed it to us. I regretted the words as soon as I said them, but Amy shouted back that I had never done anything for her, that it was Luke and his parents who had kept her afloat all these years, not me. She went on a longer tirade about how I had always acted superior to her, which I don't believe I did, though it's possible that I gave off that vibe unintentionally. Luke did his best to calm her down, but the room was still fraught with tension. I don't know, Reddit, I just don't know. It's driving me to the edge of madness. There is a way to be certain, of course, not certain of my husband's fidelity, but of the paternity of Amy's children. So I asked Luke, for my own peace of mind, for the sake of our daughter, and for our family unit, if he could please get a DNA test done, a paternity test. I went on to say that I knew he disliked and distrusted such things, but that I really needed this. I could see the pain in Luke's eyes. Maybe it was an act, but he did seem genuinely hurt that I was asking for this, that him giving me his word that he had always been faithful was not enough for me. But he very reluctantly agreed to participate in a DNA test. Unfortunately, Amy did not, and that's where we hit a roadblock. I was afraid of this. But Amy was infuriated at the whole concept and told me in no uncertain terms that I would not be getting samples of her children's DNA and basically told me to fuck off for asking, several times in several variations. I pressed Luke, and honestly he was a bit useless but probably right. He tried to convince Amy but she wouldn't hear of it and he kind of shrugged to me when I pushed him for further support. Because he can't force her to get the test done, if she refuses, that's really a dead end. Trust me, it is. I looked into this quite a bit and consulted with my lawyer. The problem is, Luke could, in theory, petition the court to demand a paternity test for Tom and the others. The issue is that, to do this, he'd essentially be claiming he slept with Amy and he believes her children to be his. That would be the version of events he'd be maintaining. But Luke has staunchly insisted that nothing ever happened with Amy. That he never cheated on me? Whether or not he's being honest about this is another story, but he'd essentially have to go on record and make a claim that he isn't prepared to make. He is quite certain the children aren't his and he has no intention of fighting for custody of them. So no judge is going to compel Amy to submit samples of her children's DNA. Tom is also old enough that his consent would be a factor. If both he and Amy refuse to participate in the test, it's unlikely that Luke would have a case. He'd have to target one of Amy's younger children, like say, one of the twins. But he doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want to take his best friend to court to prove something that, in his words, he already knows isn't true. Luke is asking me to please just let this go and trust him, because pursuing this will fracture everything. And according to my lawyer, it's not realistic anyway. For Luke to establish paternity, he would need to admit to an affair in the first place, and he's not doing that. And if he did, that would pretty much be all the proof I needed to be certain, even if I'd need more in a court case. I pestered him further about Tom and Sophie, insisted that I didn't want them dating. Luke agreed, and apparently Amy still agrees. Luke plans to have a talk with Tom and activate protective Papa Bear mode. Among other things, he's going to remind Tom that in a couple of months when he turns 18, him being intimate with Sophie will literally be a crime. I wouldn't actually press charges against him as I know he'd never do anything against Sophie's will, but I'm not above implying the threat. Thankfully, Luke isn't either. I did ask him if he'd be open to potentially swiping a sample of Tom's DNA to do a private paternity test, but he was very hesitant about the idea. Like me, he viewed it as unethical. He also pointed out that if we were to do this and Amy found out, it would mean the end of our friendship with her, most likely. Things are, Luke believes, still in a salvageable state, where Amy and I could reconcile and become friends again. And I can see how much he wants this to happen. But, if I did a DNA test on Tom behind Amy's back and she found out, I think she would hit the roof and I wouldn't entirely blame her. Though I'd be very interested to see the results. Luke ended up going to see Amy and spending the night. I know all of you are cringing and throwing up your hands, and trust me, I wasn't happy about it. That was a very long conversation. But he was adamant that he needed to perform damage control. So they spent the night together. With Luke maintaining that nothing happened. I did not sleep a wink and I kept texting him for updates. So far as I can tell, Amy will cool off, but she needs a little time. Luke and I talked things over when he came back the next morning. It was an emotionally fulfilling conversation and we ended up agreeing to take the kids, our kids, not Amy's, to visit their grandparents for a few days. It was an impromptu visit, but we've done it before and they were delighted to have us. I just really wanted our family to spend some time together away from Amy's side of the family, so to speak. I always love getting to see my in-laws. I'll refer to them as Jim, 75M, and Kat, 67F. I know Reddit is famous for stories about the mill from hell, but in my life that couldn't be further from the truth. I feel safe with them. To the point that when they took notice of how distant Luke and I were from each other, I finally relented and confessed my fears. I told them of my anxiety that Amy and Luke were having an affair, and that Amy's children might be his. Here's where things got a little bit interesting. When I told them what I was feeling, Kat just gave Jim this pointed look, and did a big, dramatic sigh. So it turns out, Kat has had similar misgivings to mine and genuinely suspected over the years that Luke and Amy were closer than they'd ever admit, that they had crossed the line in the past. Jim, on the other hand, simply refuses to even consider the idea. He has always insisted that Kat is seeing things that aren't there. He maintains that Luke and Amy are like siblings, and would never do such a thing. Kat thinks his stance on this is naive and that, even if she and Jim had taken Amy in and loved her like a daughter, that didn't mean Luke viewed her as a sister or that she viewed him as a brother. But Jim just continued to insist that this is what they are and had always been. I could tell that he and Kat have already had this conversation before, and they kept going in circles, with Kat getting exasperated. She pointed out that surrogate siblings or not, Luke and Amy were not actually brother and sister, so nothing was stopping them from being physical together if they felt a mutual attraction. At that point, Jim just sighed and walked away from the conversation. So yes, Kat has privately wondered if Amy's children weren't fathered by Luke, which is part of why she has always treated them as her grandchildren. Which was never something that I minded, to be clear. I also don't mind that Kat never voiced these concerns to me. She had no proof, and she saw far less of Luke and Amy's closeness in our adult lives than I did. As for the kids, they're doing all right. I don't know what Amy told her children, but I think the general consensus, the official version of events, is that Amy and I had a fight and needed a break from each other. That's what Luke and I told our children, and when pressed for more information, Luke did defend me and shut down the questions, saying it wasn't their business. I don't know if Amy kept to that version of events, but my children and her children have each other's phone numbers and social media, so they've presumably still been in contact over the last 2 days. I think my kids would have kept Amy's kids in the loop on the updates, and if Amy had told them anything else significant, they would have relayed that information to my kids. After all, we know Sophie and Tom are very close. I did try and talk to Sophie about that more, but the timing was off, because Sophie rejected my counsel and interpreted my reinforced reluctance as being attributed to my fight with Amy. She maintained that she wasn't dating Tom. To what degree that's actually true, I don't know. But she was going to remain close friends with him, and while she isn't usually a disobedient child, she made it very clear that she was putting her foot down on this one. And, to be fair, I can't really justify trying to separate them or forbid them from being friends. They've known each other for years. Luke has my back on them not being allowed to date, but he wouldn't have my back on them not hanging out anymore. I wish I had a more definitive update. If anything significant happens in the next few days, I can let you guys know. I'm mostly just kicking myself for not having done the secret test, even for my own peace of mind, as now I feel like I'm locked out of the only way to get definitive proof one way or the other. Relevant comments. OOP on Luke's father possible covering for him, and if his mom, Kat, suspects the same thing. OOP, Jim being in on it, did cross my mind. He's a good man, but Luke is his son. If it came to it, he'd probably support him, though I feel like he'd condemn the affair. One thing he said toward the end of the argument was that Luke is a good man and has been a good husband to me, and did Kat really think he'd see another woman? And Kat just looked at him and said, if the other woman was Amy. Then maybe. Update 2, I didn't expect to have another update so quickly. But after posting my first update, I did a lot of thinking about my kids. I ultimately decided that whatever else happened, I needed to warn Sophie about the situation, and do so immediately. To hell with Luke and whatever that meant for him. To hell if that meant all of the kids learned of the situation. She needed to be aware of what she might be getting herself into. So I discreetly kept her out of school. We went back home, to our home, last night, and this morning, I dropped everyone off and saved Sophie for last, before driving right past her school and telling her that we needed to talk. Always a frightening thing for a teenager to hear from a parent, but I was quick to establish that she was not in trouble, but she needed to know the truth about why Amy and I were fighting, why her dating Tom was out of the question. I very gently explained that because of Luke's closeness to Amy and Tom's resemblance to him, I had come to suspect that perhaps Luke and Amy were intimate at some point over the years. If that was true, and there was any chance Tom's father was actually Luke, that would be a significant problem. Sophie was quiet during all of this, and even after I had stopped talking to let her respond, she paused for quite a while, before she finally said that we needed to get Tom and discuss this with him as well. I had no objections, so she texted him to meet with us. They're both skipping school today, but Sophie gets straight A's and this is extremely important, so I looked the other way. Tom came to meet us, and Sophie had me relay what I told her to him as well. I apologized to him for any indication I might have given that I didn't think he was good enough for my daughter, and to both of them for not telling the truth sooner. Tom and Sophie just gave each other this oddly knowing stare. And Reddit, that's when they blew my mind. Sophie spoke first, with Tom backing her up. They revealed to me that in fact, they had already known about Luke and Amy, or at least they had strongly suspected. Apparently Tom has overheard conversations that are questionable, as well as overhearing the sounds of sex from Amy's room, sounds he would just as soon forget, but all signs point to Amy's lover having been Luke. Tom had wondered for a very long time, and back in January, he finally voiced his fears to Sophie. She agreed with them. She could also see a strange sort of closeness between her father and his mother. They agreed that Luke was likely having an affair. They agreed that, because of Kaylee's allergy, Luke might very well be her father. And if Kaylee was Luke's daughter, the rest of Tom's siblings could be Luke's as well. Tom could be Luke's kid himself. The math led them to the same places as me. So Sophie and Tom came up with a little plan. As it turns out, they are not in love. They never were. They're still just best friends? But they had the same instinct as me, that they didn't want to blow up our entire family and social unit without more direct evidence, which Tom has been working on acquiring. And though Sophie very badly wanted to tell me the truth, she was hesitant because she knew it would shatter me. She had no idea I was already suffering in silence. Sophie apologized for not voicing her suspicions sooner. Honestly, we both cried, and I made sure she understood that none of this was her fault and that I loved her very much. So the bottom line is, Sophie and Tom already know they could be half-siblings and aren't actually interested in being a couple. That was their idea for how to rock the boat. To force Luke and Amy to do something about the situation rather than just keep making a fool out of me. I also think it was Sophie's way of punishing them for their affair. Teenagers can be vindictive. So they concocted this idea that they wanted to date. Every flirtation I've witnessed, every inappropriate touch, all staged apparently, and for the benefit of Luke, Amy, or both. This was supposed to make them sweat, and Tom expected they would jump out of their seats to forbid it from happening. When I was the one who did instead, that kind of threw the kids for a loop. They couldn't understand why I cared more than the actual cheaters. They began to suspect that maybe I knew. Tom confronting me that one time about why can't I date Sophie was him trying to gauge if I knew or not. Maybe I shouldn't be surprised. Sophie and Tom have always been close friends and confided in each other. Maybe I should be a little more concerned at how sneaky they've been, but honestly I'm just so relieved they're not dating. Sure, they could be lying to throw off the scent I guess, but they apparently already knew that they're likely related. They didn't blink at all when I told them. We even had a bit of a laugh together when Tom mentioned how he had been a little offended that I was so against him dating my daughter before. I kind of jokingly asked him, "So you don't think she's gorgeous?" And Tom, bless his heart, shrugged it off. She is. But so is my English teacher, and I'm not asking her out either. Either way, the question now is, where to go from here? We have to figure that out. I will say that it is such a relief to have told Sophie, and I feel like an elephant has taken one of its feet off my chest. Having her in my corner, and Tom in my corner as well, means a lot to me, and even though I basically just got it absolutely confirmed that Luke is sleeping with Amy, I kind of already knew that anyway. So now it's just a question of how to proceed. Tom has already volunteered to submit his DNA so I can compare it to Luke's, and both he and Sophie advise me not to tell Luke and Amy when I do this, which I agree with. They're both completely on my side, which means more to me than I can ever express to them. Tom has also been trying to set up a camera in Amy's room to catch her and Luke in the act. Sophie told me flat out that I needed to divorce her dad, and hearing that from my own daughter made it clearer than it's ever been. She's right. Relevant comments. OOP on what she, Luke and Amy do for their jobs. OOP, Amy runs a bar. Luke writes articles. I'm a nurse practitioner. Update 3, first, a few points to answer from the comments. I don't have any DNA test results back yet, that can take weeks. But now that I know Sophie is in no danger of dating a relative, the pressure is off. I'll get into this momentarily, but it frankly no longer matters if Luke fathered the children. I highly doubt my father-in-law is having an affair with Amy. At worst, he might know, or even just suspect, the truth about Amy and Luke, but it's also possible that he just refuses to believe they would do such a thing. I've been vague about details for privacy, but to put it very simply, Jim and Amy are both pretty white. Kat and Luke are not. Had Jim fathered Amy's babies, they would look different than they do. Nevertheless, I do have an update. While a stream of comments have called me spineless and naive, called me a sister wife, as an ex-Mormon, that hits a particular nerve. And most recently, a stream of comments have said my story is fake. Fair enough, it's the internet, but Luke is not the first scumbag husband to have two families. Several other comments have been incredibly kind and supportive, and I really appreciate that. Apologies if I haven't responded to a comment or direct message that you sent. I covered as many as I could, but I was literally getting hundreds. So I definitely missed several of them. First things first. I discussed this in the comments, but our little team has, supposedly, recruited my mother-in-law. I say supposedly, because Sophie and Tom were going to talk to her about getting help with submitting the DNA test, and, at the advice of my lawyer, I am staying out of the process. Officially, I told Sophie not to do it, and she said she wouldn't. MIL hasn't contacted me about it either. Though we have been in touch, I'll get into that more in a moment. The bottom line is that I can honestly say I had no knowledge of any DNA test. Loophole City. Another bit of good news. I was digging through the paperwork in preparation for my divorce, wanting to get a head start against Luke, and one thing that came to my attention is that my name is on the paperwork for our home. Luke's name is not. I was the one who bought the house, and we always planned to add Luke onto the paperwork at some point, but we never got around to it, and eventually the idea was forgotten. It was my lawyer, Paige, who pointed this out to me, and it was like finding a winning lottery ticket on the ground. I don't know where I'd be without Paige. She's a dear friend from college who I reached out to, hat in hand, for help. She's been there for me this past week, not just as legal counsel but as a friend I really needed right now. The thing is, she's not our lawyer, me and Luke. We have our own family attorney who has helped us out of jams in the past. We clashed with our HOA a few years ago, not worth getting into right now, but Paige is a lawyer who specializes in family law and has handled divorces before. Luke remembers her from college and knows she went into law but doesn't know she's a divorce attorney. So I can have her over for coffee like we're catching up, and he has no idea anything is going on. Turns out, he's not the only one who can harbor someone under his spouse's nose under the guise of being a friend. So, on to the update. The last time I looked in Luke's phone was 3 months ago, around the point Sophie and Tom began to go around claiming they wanted to date. I found nothing. While I know how to search for recently deleted photos and didn't see any, my comments taught me how to find recently deleted messages. So, when Luke was asleep, I did just that. Swiped his phone and brought it downstairs, checked recently deleted. I am glad I did, but I also wish I had not, because I'm still reeling from the pain. Sure enough, a conversation with Amy had been deleted. Recent text talking about the conflict between her and me, with Amy describing me as a problem, and Luke trying to pacify her, without defending me at all, to be clear. They both alluded to how they had expected this for a while and just hoped it would never happen, presumably me accusing them of having an affair. While the whole conversation and the fact that it was deleted was sketchy, nothing was actually admitted. So I scrolled a bit higher, to a few days before the fight. Amy's messages got a bit more flirty. Then, I saw it. 5 days before I confronted them, Amy had sent Luke a topless pic. A selfie with no shirt or bra. Guys, I teared up. I knew it was true. I knew it in my bones, but seeing the proof still cut me like a hot knife. Doesn't help that Amy's always had bigger breasts than me. I exited the Messages app and checked Luke's recently deleted photos. Sure enough, the same selfie was there, and others. Amy topless, Amy naked, in various poses to show off. There were pictures of the two of them together, cuddled and pressed close like a couple. In some of these she was naked. In some, they both were. There were videos. Amy sent Luke a video message of herself topless, and I had to actually hear her voice talking to him in a tone that made me sick, about how she was sending him a quick video to help him get through the day. In more than one video, she called him her boo, and, hearing her call him that, I almost vomited. Stopped looking at that point, I'd seen enough. For about 5 minutes anyway, then a strange compulsion to keep searching led me to check Luke's laptop. I knew enough of his passcodes to access his iCloud storage and... yeah, basically more of the same. There were letters, long letters between them. I didn't have the heart to read past the first few lines of one of them, but I did read Luke mention our children. There were countless naked topless selfies of Amy. Selfies of them together. Videos where Amy appeared to be masturbating. There were sex tapes, of the two of them. Tom had previously offered to try and hide a camera in Amy's room, but fuck, he never needed to. Luke was hiding a whole treasure trove under my nose all along. I scrolled, and scrolled, and scrolled. There were so many. Going back years. Not all of it was even sexual. There were some photos of Amy's kids too. One video was of Kaylee and the twins playing together when they were younger, and Luke and Amy's voices from behind the camera. There were even old pictures of Luke and Amy from when they were younger. I'd even say teenagers, I snapped. All these years, I had been telling myself I had to be wrong, that it couldn't be true. Well, it was true. I know that no one forced me to look at as much of the evidence as I did, but I'm still hurting very badly from having seen it, and in that moment I wanted to act, so I did. I called my lawyer, who is a remarkable woman. It was the middle of the night, so I had to call her twice, and she picked up. Though I had woken her, when I asked her to come by and said it was an emergency, she agreed. I also asked her to draw up the paperwork and have it ready. She told me that she'd already had it ready since I first reached out to her. As I waited for her, I went through the necessary channels on Luke's laptop to make sure he wouldn't be able to remotely disconnect our access to his little stash, changing passwords and all that. My lawyer, let's call her Paige, arrived, and I went outside to greet her in the car. Spent a good half hour in the passenger seat just crying, and she was great about that, before I passed her Luke's phone and his laptop, with all the information she needed to use them. She warned me that this could be considered theft. So I asked her to forward and print out copies of everything she could and then bring the items back, because I just couldn't bear to do it myself. She agreed. I went back inside, and then, I packed up Luke's things while the house slept. At one point Owen got up to use the bathroom and asked me what I was doing, but I told him I was just cleaning. Luke stirred once or twice while I was in the bedroom but did not wake. I got all of his things packed into trash bags and I loaded up the car. That's when I woke him up and told him to come outside. He was confused and half asleep, but he did notice things were missing. I ignored his questions and just told him to come with me. So he followed me outside. Once we were by the car, I pulled out the divorce papers and officially handed them to him. That was about when he figured out what I was doing, and he tried to talk me out of it. Tried to be sweet with me, to be tender. He kept insisting that he loved me and that there had never been anything with Amy. Kept trying to persuade me not to tear our family apart. Even 2 weeks ago, I might have wilted under him because the manipulation and gaslighting were truly masterclass, but I can see through it now. I didn't tell him that I knew he was full of shit, I didn't tell him what I'd seen, I just told him we were finished. He tried a different approach. He refused to go. Stated firmly that our children were his too and that even if we were separating, I had no right to just decide the kids would stay with me over him. This was where I very coldly presented the paperwork reminding him that the house is in my name, and told him under no circumstances would my kids be staying with Amy. He argued a while longer, but in the end he decided to be the bigger person and keep the peace. At that moment I didn't care where he went. Before he left, he did ask about his phone and laptop, and I waved him off by saying they were in one of the bags. Bought a little time. I couldn't sleep for the rest of that night. I cried more. Eventually I realized I'd have to wake my children up early and explain to the extent that I could. Naturally, I woke Sophie first. I told her that I had kicked her father out and that I had discovered evidence of an affair on his devices. I did not specify what kind of evidence and she did not ask. I woke up the others and gently told them that their dad had gone to stay somewhere else for a while. That I wasn't sure where, but from now on things were going to be different. Louise was the one to ask if we were getting divorced, and I couldn't lie to her. I told her yes. Owen asked when they could see their father again and I wanted to cry. Sophie was a very big help, urging her siblings to be sympathetic to me right now and worry about dad later. I knew better than to poison them against their father. Paige warned me against doing that as well, so I only told Sophie that the affair was confirmed since she had already been in the know. However, as the kids were getting ready for school, Owen approached me and asked me point blank if it was about Amy. If Luke was going to be with her instead of me. I couldn't answer, but I suppose that's an answer on its own. Got the kids to school, and my next step was calling to have the locks changed. I knew Luke would be back for his devices before long, but thankfully Paige returned with them before he showed up again. It was a very quick visit. She just told me that all was accomplished, and she had records of everything we would need in court. Sure enough, Luke turned up an hour later demanding to know where his laptop and phone were. I had set them back in our bedroom like they had never moved, and I just told him he had forgotten them. He insisted that I had said they were in one of the bags, so I just shrugged him off and told him I must have been mistaken. After he grabbed them, he tried again to reason with me, but I just showed him the door. I knew the kids would start to come home from school before long and I think he was trying to delay leaving so he could see them. I was not having it. I started shouting again and sent him on his way. I'm still just in absolute pain and despair for what I saw. I don't know if he'll realize that anyone went through his devices and made copies of the evidence, or if he suspects I saw anything, but he obviously didn't say so. After he left, I cried once again. Talked to my mother-in-law that night. Apparently Luke did show up to his parents' house, which was a surprise, as I was so certain he'd stay with Amy. But maybe even he knows how suspicious that would look to the children and doesn't want to rock the boat as much. Maybe he knows I'm more likely to let my children see their grandmother than Amy at this point, and he wants to see them to give his version of events. That is not happening. Kat already shared his version with me, that he relayed to her and Jim. That I'm having some kind of mental breakdown, that he wishes he could help me, but my paranoia is causing me to lash out and turn violent. I was never violent. I shoved him away when he tried to hold me, that is all. And what's so hilarious is that he didn't mention Amy at all to his parents. He didn't even frame it as me falsely believing he was having an affair. Even though that's his story when talking to me, he left Amy out of it when talking to his parents. Kat noticed that. She believes me. Jim doesn't know what to believe anymore. According to Kat, he seemed very, very troubled by what he heard from all sides. As for Amy, she's radio silent. Tom has told Sophie that she's acting like nothing is wrong but is clearly stressed out. That when her children ask, she makes the same sort of claims. That I am having some kind of emotional, nervous breakdown, and pushing her away, as well as Luke. She doesn't mention anything about my accusing them of an affair, but still puts it all on me. Amy has not reached out to talk to me directly, and I have not tried talking to her since our big argument. I haven't really told my kids anything, just that I'm having disagreements with Luke and Amy, though I was very clear that it is not a question of my mental health. Honestly, I think they all kind of know what's going on. Sophie continues to be my rock, as I try to be for her and the others, and Tom continues to be our spy in the ranks. Right now, my biggest regret is the stress that all of this is causing on the children, which I knew it would, but it still needed to be done. My life has fallen apart. But it was never my life. Update 4. In my last post, there were a number of criticisms toward Paige. You guys will like this update as it turns out, you weren't the only ones who had a problem with her. As far as the deed being in my name, it's not an absolute hook, line and sinker, but Paige is convinced that between that and my having been the one paying the mortgage, I stand a very good chance. It could be interpreted as a common marital property, but I'm going for primary custody with supervised visits anyway. I'm playing hardball. People also questioned whether I should still be posting these, but so long as it's all anonymous, I am in the clear. Doesn't even matter if someone who knows me could figure out I posted this. I didn't use any real names, or reveal my location, or anything like that. As for the laptop, even Paige admitted that was questionable, but technically I gave permission and she was only doing what I could have easily done on my own. I just really didn't want to go through all of that content. As far as the divorce papers, Paige had them filled out after the very first time I contacted her. My serving them to Luke was ceremonial. She still contacted him later to officially serve him and request his lawyer's details. But before he could respond, I had already done something a little sneaky. I reached out to our family attorney, the one who has always been on call to represent me and Luke during our marriage. He helped us out of a jam with the HOA a while back. I'll call him Zach. Now, contrary to some of the comments' suggestions, I cannot just go around town consulting with every lawyer in the area, with the explicit purpose of locking my husband out of hiring them. That is bad faith and judges don't look too kindly on it. However, this was Zach. He had been my attorney, and Luke's, for years. I feel like I had just as much right to him as Luke did. And I got there first. So I was able to nail down our family's lawyer. Met with both him and Paige, and boy howdy, do they not like each other. Zach brought up some of the same problems as some of my comments. He argued that Paige's activity was in the gray area and urged me to hire him to represent me in the divorce instead. That caused a bit of conflict as Paige is explicitly a family attorney and this is her specialization. So I'm going to be consulting both of them from here on out. Zach actually thinks it's a good thing that I made these posts as they can't really do much other than prove my sanity when Luke and Amy try to argue otherwise. Overall, I am doing better. I've been talking to a friend in real life, the mom of one of Sophie's friends. I also have therapy scheduled for myself, and I intend to look into family therapy as well. When my kids ask me what's going on, I simply tell them that their father and I are having adult problems and it's nothing they need to worry about. That worked for about a day. Sophie warned me they were planning to confront me as a group, and they did, asking if Dad had cheated on me with Amy. Obviously they've been talking about this, and perhaps they have been for longer than I had anticipated. Perhaps they've been wondering. Again, even though I had absolute proof, I was hesitant to tell them as much, and let me explain why. I naturally wouldn't tell them about the pornographic content I found. I would simply say that I found messages between Luke and Amy revealing their affair. But, with the exception of Sophie, they wouldn't be satisfied with that. I already know Carter, curious little sweetheart that he is, would want to see these messages. So instead, when I was asked directly by my kids if their dad had cheated on me, I simply said I believe he did, yes. With as much sincerity as I could muster. I think they believe me. Tom and Sophie are texting nonstop, and from what I can gather, there's doubt among Amy's children as well, that this is about me losing my mind, and not about their mother being too close to my husband. I think it's slowly sinking in for poor Jim that what he didn't want to believe was possible is very much possible, and it's happening. I haven't shown him or Kat any letters or anything. They're hosting Luke, so I haven't had much of any contact with them at all. But I did have one phone call with Kat where we wished each other well. That was nice. In the background, I could hear shouting, and though Kat quickly went outside, I did hear what sounded like Jim shouting at Luke. He doesn't usually shout, he's the calmest man I've ever met, so in a way I'm worried about him but also relieved that the wool is being pulled off of his eyes. According to Kat, Luke is still staunchly denying everything. He was pretty upset when he found out that I had poached Zach though. Which gave me a kind of grim satisfaction. The test results came back. Sophie and Tom tested their DNA against each other to see if they truly are blood siblings. Here's a surprise. According to the test, they're not. They don't share any DNA. To everyone who believed Jim had fathered Amy's babies, here is definitive proof that he did not, because the test would have revealed that too. But I never believed it anyway. Sophie has her doubts and wonders if the results weren't faulty and if we shouldn't take another test to be absolutely certain, but I'm not really worried about that. More confused than anything. I was so certain Tom had to be Luke's son. He was too. Now he doesn't know what to think and I don't either. I obviously now know the affair happened and lasted years, and I know from the letters that Kaylee is Luke's child, or at least both he and Amy seem to believe she is, which confirms they were intimate 15 years ago. Now I'm just wondering for Tom's sake. Who if not Luke is his father? He does kind of look like Luke, but that might just be coincidence. In general, everything was quiet for a few days, until it wasn't. Until she finally showed her face. My best friend Amy. I am so happy I installed Ring cameras everywhere, as you are about to understand. Sure enough, Amy turned up on my doorstep and asked to talk. She had a relaxed demeanor and did not raise her voice. Assuming she was approaching me on Luke's behalf, I told her that I wasn't interested in talking to her and to just go away. She did not leave, but she didn't make a scene either. She persisted in telling me we needed to have a conversation. The kids weren't home, and did have cameras inside. I was also recording her on my phone and being discreet about it, so eventually I relented and let her in. I don't know if she realized she was on camera. We sat down on the couch, and she instantly got into the reason for her visit. Turns out, she and Luke know, or suspect, that I procured damning material from his laptop. Amy accused me of going through his devices and told me that anything I found was not my business and I needed to delete it. That was all she had to say. No apology, no admission of guilt, didn't take responsibility for her own behavior. Hell, she might have known I was recording her, because she didn't even directly acknowledge what the sensitive material on Luke's laptop actually was. So I confronted her, letting out some of my anger. I asked how she could have the nerve to make demands of me. I asked her why she and Luke would do a thing like this in the first place. Why had they seen fit to spend all these years betraying me? I posed the question that I'd been wondering about for a long time, and as I expected I got no answer. Literally, Amy didn't seem to really hear me even as I confronted her. She seemed like she was stressed. Panicked even. But she was keeping it under wraps. She ignored my questions and accusations and just kept telling me to delete whatever content from Luke's laptop that I had. She said that if I wanted to divorce Luke, that was my call, but not to drag her into it. Oh, that made me so mad. I kept my temper, but I did snap back that she was already very much in it. Amy just kept repeating herself, telling me to delete whatever I found. So I just refused. I asked her, point blank, why I should. Why did I have any reason to? Amy got more aggressive, raising her voice. She was trying to intimidate me, but I held my ground. She told me that this wasn't about me and that I needed to just do as she said. That it was very important. So I asked again, why? And yet again, she would not answer. So I asked her if Luke had sent her to do this or if she had shown up on her own. No answer to that either. It was like talking to a brick wall. So I asked her to leave. Just as I'd been afraid of, she wouldn't go. She refused to leave until I had deleted everything I'd found in front of her. I couldn't help laughing. I told her no, that wasn't going to happen. This is where I could see her starting to freak out more. In another moment, she got up, ran into the other room, and grabbed my laptop. Before I could stop her, she smashed it on the floor. I really don't know why she thought that would work or get her the outcome she wanted. I think she was just panicking. Obviously, I still have everything, except now I need to buy a new laptop. And sadly, her doing this was out of frame of the camera, but it's fine. All of my important files are backed up, and at that moment I was more concerned that Amy would do something else drastic. She looked like she was going to have a breakdown. I tried again, very calmly, to tell her that she needed to leave or I would call the police. She refused again, and just kept repeating her demand that I drop this whole cheating angle and divorce Luke without trying to argue that an affair took place. At that point I just stared at her. At the woman I had considered one of my dearest friends in all the world. And I told her that I didn't owe her anything, but she owed her children the truth. That they had the right to know where they came from. Who Luke really was to them. Amy bristled and told me it was none of my business, that I didn't understand her family and I needed to back off. She kept going back to this idea that I could divorce Luke, but I must not claim he'd had an affair with her. I just told her that I didn't need her permission to handle my divorce how I wanted and told her again to leave. She got more and more desperate, and her anger accelerated to the point that she physically attacked me. I did not expect her to actually do this. I'm not much of a fighter, but I do know the human body pretty well, and where it's weakest. She hurt me pretty badly, but I got her off me. That part was very much on camera, and the whole audio was recorded on my phone. She finally left after that, and I immediately called to file a police report. I had the strangest feeling she'd try something similar and wanted to beat her to the punch. I was able to clean myself up by the time I had to face my kids, and while I downplayed the story, I did not lie to them about why I had a black eye. I told them, for their own safety, to steer clear of Amy. I also sent the footage to Paige and Zach, as well as pictures of my injured state before I cleaned up. They've also printed out the letters that reference Kaylee as Luke's child. I really feel like Amy just screwed herself over on all this. I don't know what her motives were. Was she protecting Luke? Was this his idea? Does she just really not want the world to know she's a homewrecker? Is she covering her own ass? As if people didn't know already. The more of my social circle I talk to, and inform of the basics, the more people are confessing that they had wondered in the past if Luke wasn't cheating on me, but didn't have any concrete proof. I suppose Amy doesn't want her kids to know who fathered them, which does line up, but I'm still not sure about Tom. I didn't ask Amy about him in particular. I don't know why you guys are so eager for these updates, but I don't mind posting them. I've never blogged about my life before. I'd imagine it feels something like this. Relevant comments. OOP on pressing charges. OOP, I included it in my report. The sound of the laptop breaking is definitely on my phone and should be on the camera as well. So far as I know, she hasn't been arrested, but I'm aiming for a restraining order now. Has Amy been arrested for assault? Send the recording of the attack. OOP, I sent word to Kat. As far as I know, Amy hasn't been arrested. Nah, that's evidence. I'm not sending it to anyone without the AOK from my lawyer. OOP on if Amy has family around or not. OOP, she's not in contact with her family and hasn't been for many years. They abused her. Luke's family became her family. She never actually admitted to having an affair, actually. I noticed that too. Brief update. Sept 18, 2024. Hey guys. It's been a rough week. A lot has happened. I don't really want to talk about all of it in detail, so I'm going to keep this short. I know I never shut up, it's just how I am, but I'm going to be much more brief this go around. Luke has a lawyer now. I don't know him. But he met with Zach and Paige. To everyone saying I should have Amy arrested, I probably could have if I'd shown the police the video. Instead, I just sent it to my lawyer. Maybe this makes me foolish, but even now, I think part of me is still trying to protect people I once loved and go easy on them. But everything's been on hold for the past few days, because Jim had a heart attack. I saw Luke and I saw Amy, and Amy's kids at the funeral. It was the first time we were all together since before all this happened. Nobody talked about what's going on, short of Amy briefly apologizing for what happened before. She did seem sincere, I'll give her that. But I wasn't about to call her out anyway. Amy, Luke and Kat all seemed pretty devastated. I was too. But we all agreed not to argue or talk about the divorce and to just let the day be a ceasefire to focus on Jim. Luke and I had a nice conversation about him. I've been spending time with my kids and taking a couple of days off work. I have enough of them on the back burner. Luke also saw the kids, twice, before and after the funeral, with me present. It went well. At my direction, and Sophie's, they didn't mention Amy, and Luke didn't try anything funny with any of them. I think he does miss them and hate that he can't see them, thanks to all this. The kids are also pretty upset about losing Grandpa, on top of not being able to see Dad as much as before. I don't think any of them blame me, but that's far from the point, frankly. Carter slept in my bed the last 3 nights. I'll get more into this in the future when I have the energy to talk about what's going on in more detail. But whoever suggested that Kat lied about the test results was correct. She never sent them in. She confessed as much to me. I guess she didn't feel comfortable going behind her son's back. But did feel comfortable lying to me to protect him. Until she didn't, until she felt guilty, and she came clean. Under the circumstances, I am not angry with her, but I know better than to trust her anymore. As far as I know, she did not tell Luke about the test, but it means Tom could still be Luke's son. Probably is. My lawyers finished going through Luke and Amy's letters with a finer tooth comb. The bottom line is, they definitely found what it was that Amy didn't want me to see, and I now completely understand why she was so panicked. It has to do with why Amy and Luke didn't marry conventionally. They did something very bad. But this is genuinely something that I'm not sure I should be talking about. Even on an anonymous internet post. I haven't even been able to collect my feelings about what Amy and Luke have done, especially with everything else going on, so I don't know if I should be more explicit. I'm sorry, I know that's not what anyone wanted to hear, but please try to understand. Paige agreed with me, that when in doubt, don't post it. I've told my lawyers to put a pin in it for now because I'm in no fit state to figure out how to proceed with it or if I should use it against them. I'm just feeling like shit, honestly. It's difficult not to blame myself for Jim. I can only imagine Luke and Amy are blaming themselves too. I know they're bad people. I don't forgive them. But this tore them apart as it did me, and I think all 3 of us feel like the divorce stressed Jim out to the point where it may have contributed. He already had heart disease. And in particular, I blame myself for showing him what I showed him. I showed him proof of the affair shortly before he died. I'll be carrying that with me for a very long time, even if I shouldn't. I'll update again whenever I do. I'm sorry, I'll respond to comments as I can. My daughter asked me to meet my granddaughter after 17 years. Am I the asshole for saying don't care for her or her daughter and to never contact me again? Original post, June 28, 2024. I am not sure if I'm an AH. Going to provide some background. I am in my 60s now. I was married to my ex-wife, and we had a daughter. Our marriage was going through its ups and downs, but I was really close with our daughter. But as our marriage was going through its difficulties, I made a huge mistake I still regret to this day. I started having an affair with my coworker. She was in a violent, physically abusive relationship at home. We became friends at work, and things just escalated from there. She got an out from me, she got the support she needed to file for divorce from her husband, who is currently in jail now. The affair went nowhere and we called it off shortly after, but I was glad that she got out of her abusive relationship and that she was safe. But when my ex-wife found out about the affair, things didn't go well. She lashed out and said a lot of horrible things about me to our daughter, who was 15 at the time. I admitted full fault with the affair, but even after the divorce, I sensed that the distance between me and my daughter was growing, until one day, my daughter said she wasn't going to speak with me anymore, and she was going to cut me off from her life forever. That was the most painful thing anyone had ever said to me. I begged her to please reconsider. I still remember that day. But time passed on. My daughter kept her word, and after trying to connect with her for the first year, I gave up. I found out from one of my mutual friends that my ex-wife married a great guy. I was happy because I was hoping that would remove the hatred from my ex-wife and my ex-wife would advise our daughter to at least rekindle a relationship with me. But that never happened. I moved states a year later. I am at peace now, but still have some aching sadness. I have retired. Both my parents have passed away. My brother passed away tragically a couple of years ago. To be honest, I am waiting for my turn. I have only my dog and my sister left. A couple of hours ago my daughter called me on my phone. I haven't spoken to her in 17 years. I instantly recognized her voice, but I didn't feel anything. No happiness, no sadness, just indifference. She was crying a lot on the call, and we caught up on life. She's married, and she has a daughter who's now 12. She apologized for cutting off contact, and she says her mom asked her to reconnect with me, as her mom felt guilty about how everything played out. She said she really wanted me to meet her daughter, and her daughter was constantly asking about granddaddy. But I wasn't feeling anything. After we caught up on everything in our life, I told her I don't care about her or her daughter, and to never contact me again. I then hung up. Was I the AH? AITA has no consensus spot. OOP received the majority of YTAs, with few others. Comments: Tidy Nuggets. This is one of the most obvious YTA posts I've seen here, good fucking lord. Top palpitation 4681. Well, it's already been said, but you're the asshole. Spouse 123, YTA. I hate when adults make very bad adult decisions that affect their children and then blame the children when they respond in a very childlike manner. Your daughter was a teenager. That is a rough time for kids even when their home life is stable. You gave her one whole year before you cut bait and gave up on her. Then you moved away. You told your daughter that she wasn't important enough to fight for and she believed you. Now that she is an adult with a child of her own, she has reached out to you and you again told her she wasn't important to you. She now knows she was probably right to cut you out the first time. OOP updated the next day. Same post, June 29, 2024. Update. Look, I was extremely drunk last night. The words which came out of my mouth weren't the best, and my comments on my post weren't great either. Seeing how everyone said I was the AH, I decided to call my daughter again an hour ago. I didn't really expect her to pick up the call, but she picked up immediately. I apologized last night, and she said there was no need to apologize. I then sent her a link to this Reddit post on messages, and told her I know I was the AH, and thousands said so. She again said I wasn't the AH. She started crying again. I told her she's free to come to my house anytime the next 4 months, because after that I will be leaving the country with my sister and our dog. Our parents left us a nice farmhouse in their home country, and we will be spending the rest of our lives there. I sent her my address and messages, and my daughter said she'd come with her husband and her daughter by the end of next week. She asked if she was welcome to stay there for multiple days, and I told her she could stay for however long she wanted, as our house was spacious enough. Update 2. I have moved to the farmland, and am looking forward to spending the rest of my life here with my dog and my sister. It is peaceful and scenic. My daughter did come by to visit me with her husband and her daughter before I left the country. It was really nice seeing my granddaughter, who looked a lot like her mom. They stayed over at our place for a week, and we had a good time. However, it got a little sad when I told my daughter in private I had no interest in being a grandfather, and just didn't have strong emotions for it. I think those words really stung her, and my daughter did cry a lot after I said those words. My daughter wanted to rekindle our relationship, but it's just too late now. I told my daughter she's free to visit me in the farmland anytime she wants and the house is always open, but I doubt she'll be visiting anytime soon. The week she stayed over at my place before I left the country was a final goodbye for us. She has my number, but she hasn't called or texted since she left, and I haven't called or texted her either. That's the update for the many interested. This will probably be my only update. Comments. Commenter 1. I'm definitely about to be an outlier here based on these comments, and I'm going to stick to it. Based on the original post from 81 days ago, where not surprisingly most people called you TA, not only are you TA, you're a deadbeat selfish father and a cheater. You made your bed, you had a child and then cheated on your wife. You then blamed that child for your disgusting betrayal. And this is about to be odd after calling you TA, but I am proud that you decided to speak up and tell the truth. No child deserves to have a father who loves her so little, blames her for his mistakes, and now refuses to see her or his granddaughter because of his mistakes. Thank you for at least being honest that you are a terrible human being and not wasting her time. After my dad died, my mom threw out all of his belongings to make room for her partner and forced me out, saying she didn't want filth from the past. My father died 3 weeks ago, following a protracted illness. He had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis a few years back. He fought valiantly, but he soon became unable to continue, and we lost him. It was a great emotional blow for me because I was much closer to my father than to my mother. I, 18M, had no idea how to feel, and I was just starting to deal with my sadness when my mother decided to toss me out of the house so she could move in with her boyfriend. Within 1 week, I lost my father and discovered that my mother had been having an affair with a coworker all along. I'm not sure if my father knew about it, but it doesn't make a difference. I was outraged when she brought home her boyfriend just 4 days after my father died, and we had a heated argument after he left. She told me that this romance had been going on for a long time, basically since my father was diagnosed. She stated I had no idea how tough it was for her to have a sick partner, and so I had no right to blame her for finding love elsewhere. She also stated that she was aware that she would eventually lose her spouse, therefore she saw nothing wrong with what she was doing. I informed her that what she did was extremely pathetic. She told me I had to leave, so I paid for it the next day. She didn't want any filth from the past in her home anymore, and she wasn't just talking about me. She and her boyfriend had begun moving a lot of belongings from my father's room in the morning. By the time I awoke, there were crates in the front yard. My mother informed me that I could either take the boxes with me or burn them. Either way, they were all leaving her house. They gave me a few hours to gather my belongings and depart. I opted to spend my time packing my possessions rather than disputing with them. My mother's actions suggested she was too far gone, and I didn't want to sacrifice my dignity by speaking to her. We had pretty well stopped getting along a few months before my father died because she was constantly fighting with him. I didn't believe it was proper to dispute trivial matters and be so mean to him, especially because we knew he wasn't going to make it. After learning of the affair, I lost all respect for her, therefore I was relieved to be going. I made a few phone calls, and after a while, my girlfriend said she could speak with her parents and allow me to stay with them for a few weeks until I could get back on my feet and make other plans. I am quite appreciative of that. I've been living with them since my mother booted me out, and they've been quite nice, particularly my girlfriend. We've just been dating for 3 months, and she didn't need to do this, but I'm grateful to her. On the day I left, I grabbed the boxes that my mother had thrown away, which included my father's stuff, as well as my own. I figured I couldn't let them burn since that would mean losing the remainder of what my father left behind. This made my room really cramped due to all of the items, but it was worth it. For the past few days I'd avoided even glancing at those crates, let alone rummaging through them. The reason was simple: it reminded me too much of my father, and I was not prepared to confront it. I knew I'd end up bawling on the floor since I already missed him so much. So I'd been avoiding it like the plague. However, 2 days ago, I made the decision to go through some of the boxes, regardless of how difficult it was. I was extremely lucky because the first box I chose was full of documents and documentation from my father's room, from before he was taken to the hospital in his final weeks of life. He had been working from his room in the house because he was in no fit to go out every day. My father worked as a tax consultant for a large corporation, so there was a lot of paperwork involved. I didn't comprehend much of it, so I put it aside. I got to the bottom of the box and found a blue manila file with my name on it. That was it. What I discovered there is going to finish my mother, and I'm here for it. Going through the contents of that folder, I learned that my father had really left a will, which my mother was presumably unaware of. Or perhaps she did and was just not telling the lawyer. Not only did I uncover the will, but also several additional documents, including the house deed. It found out that the house did not belong to both of my parents, but rather to my father. After reading the will, I learned that my father had left the house and all of the money in his account to me. My mother had only received his car, which was still a huge deal because my father drove a lovely automobile, and she had taken ownership of their holiday property. I recognized my mother had no right to kick me out of the house because it did not belong to her, now or at any moment. It was originally my father's, and it is now mine. So far, my father's lawyer had informed me that his assets would be frozen until the court determined how they would be distributed. However, as soon as I discovered those documents, I called him and informed him of my findings. I invited him to my girlfriend's house and asked if I may move back into my own house, as my father's will clearly specified that the house belonged to me, not my mother. He affirmed that I was free to do so if I wanted, and that my mother had no authority to kick me out without appropriate notice. That was everything I needed to know. The lawyer would manage the will's execution, but I planned to address the problem with my mother. I called her right away and informed her I'd found my father's will. He had indicated that he would leave me the house and all of the money in his bank account. She remained silent for a few minutes before saying it didn't matter to her. But now that the tables had been turned, I asked her to leave the premises. The house never belonged to her, and she had done nothing to deserve it. She'd been nasty to my father and now she was being horrible to me. I informed her that I wanted her out by the end of the week. That's when she began groveling. To be honest, I anticipated her to argue with me because that is how she has always been, argumentative and unpleasant to everyone around her. Instead, she begged me not to say or do anything because she had convinced her partner to move in by promising to handle everything. Apparently, her co-worker was married but had recently filed for divorce, and his ex-wife was demanding a large sum of alimony, which was understandable given that he cheated. He was concerned about it, and my mother promised him that she would manage everything for him. This meant allowing him to live with her so he didn't have to worry about housing or rent and could concentrate on his divorce. If I approached them and stated that the house did not even belong to her, she would be screwed. So if I talked to her boyfriend, she would not only be homeless, but also alone. I'm not a cruel person, so I told my mother she could keep behaving as if she had the means to help her partner, but I didn't want her to live in my house anymore. I vowed not to say anything about what she had told me as long as she agreed to leave the house by the end of the week. I didn't care where she went, all I needed was for her to leave so I could return to my home. Then she started telling me it wasn't fair, it was blackmail, and I couldn't do this to her. I reminded her of how cruelly she had treated me just a few days before, so it was absurd that she wanted me to consider her circumstances now. I did not believe I was being unjust. After disagreeing with me for a while, she began crying on the phone, saying she couldn't believe I was treating her like this simply because she wanted to be happy in her life for once. She claimed she didn't want to marry my father, but she was already pregnant with me and her family had pushed her to. She claimed my father had never treated her properly, had always been preoccupied with his work, and had never made enough time for her. She was only trying to have a good life with her partner, and the only reason she kicked me out was because she knew I was like my father. I wouldn't stand in the way of her happiness. She stated that my actions were proving her point. I didn't know what to say at this point, so I told her she had 1 week and hung up. Since then, I've been feeling rather guilty. I'm not sure why, but hearing her cry over the phone made me feel horrible. I'm not sure if this is because I'm doing anything wrong, or if it's simply because I'm a sensitive person who can't bear hearing people cry. I'm bewildered, so I'm here to ask, AITA, why did you tell my mother and her boyfriend they had 1 week to vacate the house? Edit. I don't have any family in this state, so I had to rely on my friends for aid. I've spoken with my grandparents because I'll be attending college in a few months and will need their support to handle expenditures. After describing the issue to them, they severed relations with my mother. She's probably not worse off for it, because she never got along with her own parents and only had a cordial relationship with her in-laws. Regarding the will, I'm not sure why my father left the house and all of his money to me, or why he hadn't discussed it with his lawyer. I did ask my father's lawyer about it and he revealed that he had been urging my father to prepare a will since he was diagnosed, but my father kept claiming he would do it later. Now, it appears that he left behind a holographic will because there were no witnesses or lawyers involved, which may make it simpler for my mother to fight it. We'll deal with it as it arises. Fortunately, in our state, even such wills are regarded as genuine, and I'm thinking my father was aware of this. As for why he left the most essential stuff to me, I'm guessing it's because he presumably drafted this document while at home, and my mother had been arguing with him over nothing in particular. She was only arguing with him because she could, and he couldn't just leave her, no matter how upset he was. I suppose that is why he took this decision, and to be honest, I believe it was a good one. To address your questions, I don't know my father's specific motives, but here is my theory. Update 1. Hello, I am still living with my partner, and after reading the comments, I have decided to rethink my decision. I will continue to insist that my mother leave the house, but I have chosen to modify the terms of my agreement. After I posted the last update, many of you urged that I consider the possibility that my mother will fight the will, which would cause me a lot of grief. I thought about it, and you were correct. I didn't think about it at first, so I called my mother back. I informed her that I was now willing to give her 6 months to locate a place and move out of the house. She looked astonished when I mentioned it because we hadn't spoken since our last conversation. She didn't have an explanation for her change of heart, but I did tell her that since I was giving her 6 months, she needed to swear not to fight my father's will. Hopefully, 6 months would be enough time to verify the legality of the will in court, and then we could begin dividing the assets. I suppose 6 months would also allow my mother's boyfriend enough time to finalize his divorce. Personally, I would have liked to generate a lot of hardship for my mother and ask her to leave within a week, making sure she felt as bad as I did. But hey, I need to. Right now, it's more vital for me not to act rashly because that will only lead to difficulties for me rather than her. She stated she would think about it before agreeing to anything, so we'll see what she says. Update 2. Hello, 3 days ago I told my mother that if she promised not to fight the will, I would let her stay in the house for another 6 months. I was leaving for college in 3 months anyhow, so I assumed I'd ask my grandparents to send me money so I could buy an apartment. I did not want to burden my fiancée by staying with her for so long, but her parents insisted that I do so. My girlfriend and I have only been together for 3 months, but we genuinely love each other, so she said the same thing. With my living arrangement fixed, I wasn't in a hurry to have my mother leave the house because it didn't make sense. I hoped my mother would agree to my demands so that I could have my father's lawyer sign off on them. If she signed a legal contract, she wouldn't be able to back out. I was expecting to hear from her with good news, but instead she called me today and asked if I expected her to sign any paperwork or contracts for our agreement. I instantly replied yes since I did not want to mislead her. And to be honest, I did not trust her. This was a given. She paused for a few seconds before telling me that she was not interested in signing a contract. That annoyed me because it implied that if she knew she had to stick to it or face the repercussions, she was hesitant to make any promises. I was upfront with her, telling her that if she wasn't willing to sign a legal agreement, my offer was off the table. I told her I didn't trust her at all, and she shouldn't be shocked considering her recent behavior towards me, which has been nothing short of nasty. I expected her to disagree, but she told me she agreed, though she also didn't trust me, insisting that I was unquestionably my father's kid. I had no idea what that had to do with anything, because neither my father nor I had ever done anything that could be considered untrustworthy. The only thing she had against my father was that she had been forced to marry him because she became pregnant with me, and my grandparents decided it was best to proceed with the marriage. That is not my fault, nor is it my father's fault. If she didn't want to marry him, she should have stood up for her rights. Besides, I am not even sure how true her narrative is. I asked my grandparents about it and they stated they hadn't really pressured her. But they had only encouraged her not to raise me on her own because she was so young at the time, and my parents appeared to be in love. Both of my grandparents suggested they marry, but there was no pressure on them. The other issue my mother faced with my father was that he worked too much. I don't believe that's a major issue because, of course, he had to work. My mother didn't work for the first few years of their marriage and finally started working about 7 years ago. She obtained the position since one of her friends and her friend's spouse founded the company. Otherwise, she would not have found the position she currently brags about. She claims to be an independent lady, but that is only because my father has always supported her. She had no right to say she didn't trust me because I'm my father's son. I was annoyed, so I told her she could do anything she wanted, but because she refused to sign a contract, I wanted her out of the house. I hung up before she could say anything. She tried phoning me numerous times after that, but I was too annoyed to speak with her. She hasn't called in the last half hour, but I'm confident she will. I will only talk to her after I've calmed down. Update 3. My mother did not call me again following our last talk, as I described in my previous report. I waited for her to call for the next 2 days, but she just did today. I was nervous because I wasn't sure what to anticipate. To be honest, on the one hand, I genuinely wanted her to agree to the deal I proposed, in which I let her reside in the house for 6 months until she could make alternative arrangements, in exchange for her not contesting the will. I thought I was being fair, but after our last disagreement I wasn't sure she would agree. When she called today I tried to be kind and civil because this wasn't just about her. I also had something to lose. I was expecting positive news, but as soon as I picked up, she informed me that she had made her decision. She opted not to sign any contracts. Instead, she was determined to fight the will, and she had even consulted with a lawyer about it. I was taken aback because this obviously meant she would no longer be residing in the house, which belonged to me. I told her that if she contests the will, she will no longer be able to live in my house. I hoped that would bring her back to her senses, but she said I had no authority to kick her out because the will had not yet been ratified. She had a point, but she also had no authority to kick me out because we were in a bit of a gray area right now. I told her we'd probably have to live together until the probate was completed. That concept clearly made her uncomfortable, and after a few seconds, she informed me she'd look for a place to live, but she'd take her time because I had no right to tell her what she should do. I assured her again that she could take as much time as she wanted, but that I would be back by the end of the week. She began ranting, accusing me of being a bother and claiming she had done nothing to deserve the harassment I was subjecting her to. I almost laughed because her claim that I was bothering her was the biggest joke of the century. She kept attempting to rant, but I hung up because we had nothing else to talk about. She'd made her decision and I didn't think I could change it anymore. I'm going to do what I believe is right and she can't stop me. Her partner, who is going through his own divorce, will not be much assistance to her either. I, on the other hand, have my family, girlfriend, and friends on my side. In fact, I believe I will tell her boyfriend the truth about my mother because I have been withholding information for far too long. Since she has made up her mind, I have decided to be an inconvenience, and there is no reason to keep this a secret any longer. Update 4. I did it. I informed my mother's lover the truth about the situation at the house. I don't think he had any notion until recently, which is strange considering he lived with my mother. This is a major deal to keep from your boyfriend, especially since she was still in contact with me, and I'm sure he would have asked about it. But I assume she's pretty adept at keeping secrets. After all, she hid her affair for a few years. It was not difficult to reach him. I just searched him up on Facebook and sent him a message containing proof. I also explained why I was telling him the truth now and not earlier, because I had been negotiating with my mother. But since she had made it apparent that she was not interested, I believed he had a right to know the truth. I sent the message 2 days ago and I finally heard from my mother today. I was expecting an eruption, but I didn't realize it would come so late. Anyway, she tried contacting me this morning, but I blocked her out of frustration. I've also blocked her on social media. When she ran out of other ways to contact me, she set up a fake email account and sent me a message from that address. In the email, she said that I should be pleased now because I had caused so much drama between her and her boyfriend for no reason. She claimed he had decided to leave her and return to his wife to attempt to work things out, blaming her for the entire situation, which, to be honest, he was correct about. I'm not really sure what she's furious about. The message was lengthy, and it contained warnings that she would make sure I paid a high price for this. All I could think was, she can bring it on. Truth be told, she no longer scares me. I've already lost all I could lose, and there's only one direction to go. Up. So, I'm looking forward to the court case. Update 5. Hello guys. I haven't kept you updated on what's been going on in my life over the last year, and I believe it's time I did. As I previously stated, I was looking forward to the court process, and my mother did end up fighting the will. The case got to court, and my father's attorney and I fought as hard as we could. Long story short, after 8 months, we eventually received a favorable ruling. The will was validated and upheld. This happened 2 months ago, and I'm still really pleased with it. My mother had to give up the house, and we no longer communicate with her. I have no idea what she is up to, but I am delighted she received her karma. Even her own parents have stopped communicating with her, so I'm pretty sure she's not living a joyful life right now. My neighbors told me that on the day she moved out, her boyfriend came to help her. So I'm betting they're back together, because no self-respecting lady would return to a man who had cheated on her. I'm very sure his wife rejected him, so he crawled back to my mother to make things right, and she gratefully accepted him back. Honestly, I'm pleased they're together. They deserve each other. I'm confident my father is beaming down at me from heaven because I've demonstrated resilience, strength, and a willingness to stand up for what is right. I'm in college now, set to begin my 2nd year. My grandparents are currently supporting me financially, and they will continue to do so until I find work, for which I'm glad. I know many of you are intrigued about my relationship. She also attends college, and we meet on weekends. In fact, we're arranging a little break for just the two of us this weekend. We are still going strong and are really serious about each other. Life is currently serene, and I am grateful to be at this point. Getting here was the most difficult part. After that, everything else felt easy.